Alam mo, Mig,
Give me an opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. There's a bit of feedback.
Mig,
Um,
Mig.
wait, we're on session, Tita Cynthia,
Okay.
Senator Villar. Yes, hello, Mr. President. I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Additional reference of business. Senate number 1, creating the national, defining its appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator.
Referred to the committees on basic and finance and higher education and finance.
Senate number 1527, an act providing for the development, administration, organization, training, maintenance, and utilization of the Medical Reserve Corps and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Referred to committees on health and finance.
Senate number 1528, an act amending Republic Act number 11332, otherwise known as the Mandatory Reporting of Notifiable Diseases and Health Events of Public Health, introduced by Senator.
To the committees on health and justice.
Senate number 1529, an act requiring the establishment of quarantine facilities in every region in the country, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Go.
To the committees on health, public works, and finance.
Senate number 1530, an act amending Section 18, Book 7, Chapter 3 of the Administrative Code of the Philippines, introduced by Senator Drilon.
To the committees on constitutional amendments and public services.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 403. The committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation under the country's and the accessibility of vital medical equipment and supplies with the end goal of improving the country's responsiveness to the current COVID-19 preparedness for health emergencies, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the committees on health.
PS 04, resolution urging the committee to goals, innovation, and futures thinking to conduct a hearing legislation on the effects of the COVID-19 health country for future pandemics and other health emergencies, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Committees on
Communication, letter from the Executive Secretary of the Office of the President, respectfully transmitting to the Senate the 7th report of the President of the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee pursuant to Section 5 of Republic Act number 11469, otherwise known as the Bayanihan to Heal Us One Act.
to the committee on finance. Committee on finance. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have 2 bills for sponsorship today and several co-sponsors. So with the permission of the body, I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar of special orders. Committee report number 86 under Senate Bill number 1520. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1520 and ask the Secretary to read the title.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order. The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1520, an act establishing a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we call the distinguished chair of the committee, Senator Joel Villanueva. And to co-sponsor, Mr. President, I believe you have also you're listed as the co-sponsor, the Senate President, Senator Bongo, Senator Bato de la Rosa, Senator Ralph Recto, Senator Nancy Binay. But for the first sponsor, Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Villanueva.
Yes, Senator Joel Villanueva, the principal sponsor of the measure, is recognized. May we call on Senator Lacson to join us here in the rostrum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I have the honor to present Senate Bill number 1520, or the Medical Scholarship Act Bill under Committee Report number 86. President, I cannot think of any other proof to show the significance of this measure other than the fact that this is the very first bill, Senate Bill number 1, the 18th Congress, and authored primarily by no less than the Senate President himself, Senator Tito Soto. Today, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is also the death anniversary of the great Senator Edgardo J. Angara, known champion of education and Senate's great treasure. And so let me also put on record that this sponsorship speech is also dedicated to Senator Ed Angara, the father of our colleague Sani Angara. Mr. President, Senate Bill number 1520 seeks to establish a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving Filipino students in state universities and colleges and in partner private higher educational institutions in regions where there are no SUCs offering medicine. The passage of this measure is long overdue. No event in recent history has demonstrated with pristine clarity the urgent need to increase the number of medical professionals in the country. The time to establish a medical scholarship and return service program is now. Mr. President, according to 2017 report by the World Health Organization, in total, there are around 40,775 doctors in public and private health facilities, respectively. This means, Mr. President, that there are only about 3.9 doctors for every 10,000 population in the country. This is very far from the ideal ratio of 10 doctors for every 10,000 population. Based on our calculation, to fill this gap, we need an additional 66,350 doctors in the country. Indeed, we have seen the devastating doctor shortage long before the COVID-19 pandemic. The lack of doctors in the country is even more aggravated by the fact that some doctors leave the country for greener pastures. Moreover, most of our physicians are in urban areas. For example, based on 2017 WHO study, there are 10.6 doctors for every 10,000 population in Metro Manila. While in the autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao region, has only 0.9 doctor, less than 1%. Less than 1, Mr. President, per 10,000 population. And yet, even with a doctor density of 10.6 in Metro Manila, there is no assurance that a sick person can be attended immediately when he or she goes to a hospital in Metro Manila. The woman who just gave birth died of blood loss in Caloocan City. One after another, 6 hospitals allegedly refused 6 hours. One of the 6 hospitals that turned them away reportedly said that they did not have available obstetrician at the time. San Jose del Monte General Hospital, the only hospital that did not turn them away, declared the woman dead on arrival because blood loss. A doctor is the only hope for a dying person, Mr. President. But how many more people will die on the streets wandering to find a hospital or a physician? According to the Coalition for Primary Care, 6 out of every 10 Filipinos die without seeing a doctor. Most of them are poor and vulnerable. Mr. President, bakit nga po ba kulang na kulang ang mga doktor sa ating bansa? One certain answer is the prohibitive cost of going to medical school. According to Dr. Gap Legaspi, the medical director of Philippine General Hospital, the cost of a PGH medical education for 5 years is about 1.8 million, excluding living and other school expenses. The high cost of tuition fees in medical schools is even aggravated by the fact that more than half of the regions in the country do not have a state university or college that offers medical programs. Worse, 4 regions, which are Mimaropa, Region 12, Caraga, and Barm, do not even have any private or public higher education institution that offers medical programs. Thus, aspiring medical students in these regions will not only have to think about paying for their tuition fees, but also where to get their lodging and living expenses. Surely, an average Filipino family earning 313,000 annually, which is the average income of a Filipino family based on the 2018 Family Income and Expenditure Survey, will hardly be able to afford this and still support an average Filipino size of 4 to 5 members. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this piece of legislation seeks to help young, talented, and yet financially strapped people like so many of our kababayans to enroll. The proposed medical scholarship will cover tuition fees, all other school fees, including board and lodging, transportation, and other miscellaneous expenses. Also included will be the internship, medical board review, and licensure fees. In exchange for education at the expense of the taxpayers, the bill requires a return service of 1 year per year of inclusion into the program. The mandatory return service will allow beneficiaries to serve an underserved public health office or government hospital. DOH will determine the priority areas, but the recipient's hometown will be first in the order of priority. In the long run, we hope to see to it that the medical profession is accessible to the masses. In so doing, Mr. President, we hope to make medical doctors and health services available to every Filipino across the country. Finally, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it is not for nothing that our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, is a physician. Heroism runs in the blood of medical doctors. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, our physicians face the accompanying risks and inconveniences serving at the front lines. Their heroic sense of duty found honor and glory. They found fulfillment in serving the country during this public health emergency. Indeed, I believe that the passage of this law will be a milestone, not only for medical profession in the Philippines, but also for the whole Filipino. Before we end, Mr. President, allow me again to reiterate our thanks and appreciation to all of our colleagues for their interest and support to this measure, most especially the original author of this measure since time immemorial, our Senate President, Vicente Soto III, co-authors, President Pro Tempore Senator Ralph Recto, Senators Nancy Binay, Grace Po, Senator Bato de la Rosa, Senator Bongo, and other members of the committee who have actively participated during the deliberations of this. In the above merit, honoring our fallen heroes, medical frontliners who risked their lives to save ours, I urge you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, to support immediate passage of this measure. Thank you very much, and may God bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to recognize the distinguished Senate President, Senator Vicente Tito Soto III.
The Senate President is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Majority Leader, thank you. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I purposely chose the Medical Scholarship Act as my #1 priority bill. As such, my bill is recorded as Senate Bill #1, not because I predicted the coming of the COVID-19 outbreak, but because the shortage of doctors in an ongoing is and has always been an ongoing concern of the country, among other problems. Mahatma Gandhi once said, and I quote, "It is health which is real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver." End of quote. It is that important that it has been a declared policy of the state and enshrined in the highest law of the land to protect and promote the right to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them. However, even though the government is allotting so much of our limited resources for the country's healthcare, with an increasing budget and spending trend every year, it seems that there are still a lot of areas for improvement. One of the areas that have to be addressed is the worsening shortage of doctors. And this has been an alarming concern even prior to this COVID-19 crisis. In a 2016 data, mentioned earlier also by Senator Villanueva, our principal sponsor, the doctor-to-patient ratio in the Philippines is 1:33,000. It is way, way below the World Health Organization's desirable doctor population ratio of 1:1,000. Thus, there is undeniably a problem remedied. In addition to the scarcity in the number of doctors, and another issue that has been is to be addressed in relation thereto is the severe maldistribution of physicians in the country caused by most doctors preferring to practice in the urban areas than in the rural. According to the article published by the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism on September 11, 2019, 65% of the total physicians in the public sector are working in Luzon, and 32% which are in Metro Manila alone. Only 18% of government physicians are in the Visayas, and an even smaller number of 16% in Mindanao. This proposed measure seeks to address both issue of scarcity and maldistribution of physicians because the granting of scholarships to deserving medical students would aid in the increase of the number of physicians in the country. At the same time, this proposed bill would require the scholar to serve in a government public health office or government hospital in his or her hometown, province, or region. Such a situation would hopefully put a sense of balance in the distribution of doctors, particularly in the government sector, which take care of nearly 70% of the healthcare needs of the population. Alam na alam ng mga kababayan natin, maraming gustong magdoktor. Bata pa lang. Ang nakakapigil, walang pambayad. Ito na po ang sagot. The immediate passage of this measure does not need to be emphasized. If we are not bound by any rules, Mr. President, I would have immediately moved for its approval. But since we are, I sincerely hope for the expeditious approval of the Medical Scholarship Act. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sir Senate President. Session is suspended for 1 minute to allow the Senate President to reclaim his seat here at the rostrum.
Biggs?
Thank you. I think,
Senator Joe, you're the leader.
thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the next in line to deliver a sponsorship speech is Senator Christopher Bongo, Mr. President. If he's,
Senator Christopher Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good day to all. As chairperson of the Committee on Health and Demography, I express my support to the Medical Scholarship and Return Service Program for deserving Filipino students who want to serve the country in the field of medicine. Before I became a senator, I was a long-time personal aide of President Rodrigo Duterte during his time as mayor of Davao City. I was with him performing what you can also call as public service. We visited the sick, we helped the poor, and Mayor Duterte did his best to address the healthcare situation in Davao City, which is why you can see how progressive and responsive our healthcare is in the South. My duty came with many realizations, one of which is that addressing healthcare must be taken through a holistic approach. Isa sa dapat sikapin nating itaguyod ay ang pagpapadami ng ating mga healthcare workers sa bansa Aminado tayo na kulang tayo sa mga doktor, lalong-lalo na po sa mga probinsya. Ang ating doktor to patient ratio ay hindi makakasustento sa tugon ng kalusugan sa ating bansa sa ngayon. Higit pa sa krisis na kinakaharap natin ngayon, maraming doktor at medical professionals ang naisakripisyo ang kanilang buhay. Nabawasan pa tayo. Mr. President, aminin din natin na hindi mura ang pag-aaral ng medisina, ngunit maraming Pilipino ang gustong kumuha ng kursong ito. Through the medical scholarship bill, the student will be assisted financially, covering their tuition and other school fees, allowance for prescribed books, supplies, and equipments, clothing and uniform allowance, among others. This scholarship will cater to serving Filipino students in state universities and colleges and in partner private higher education institutions in regions where there are no state universities and colleges offering the medicine course. Once a medical student passes the licensure exam, they must provide a return service equivalent to the years they have also assisted by the medical scholarship program. This will pave way for us to substantially support the number of our doctors in the country, and particularly increase the number of doctors in the provinces or regions they belong or as identified by the Department of Health. This vision is also in line with the Balik Probinsya program that I have proposed and was already approved by the executive department. Once we have more doctors in the provinces, we can assure Filipinos that a better life is waiting for them in the rural community. Mr. President, kapag natapos natin ang laban sa COVID-19, malaki ang papel na dapat gampanan ng ating gobyerno sa pagpapataas ng bilang ng mga doktor sa bansa, lalong-lalo na po sa mga probinsya. Sabi nila, edukasyon ang sagot sa kahirapan. Para sa akin, edukasyon ang daan natin para sa kaunlaran. Maraming Pilipino ang gustong tumulong at magserbisyo para sa isang malusog na Pilipinas. Bigyan natin ang pagkakataon ng kabataang Pilipino na makapag-aral ng kursong ito at makapaglingkod bilang doktor sa bansa. I believe that the passage of this bill will significantly improve our healthcare system in the country. Mr. President, dear colleagues, inihimo ko ang lahat mga narito na suportahan po natin ito, ang Medical Scholarship and Return Service Program. I would like to commend a good sponsor for pushing for this measure, and I also wish to convey my intention to be a co-author of this significant legislation. Better healthcare requires a strong backbone of doctors and health professionals. If we do this, we can establish a better healthcare system and ultimately a better Philippines. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yes,
we
Mr.
recognize Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa to sponsor the measure.
Senator Ronald De La Rosa is recognized.
Mr. President, Senator Bato's in mute. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President and Majority Leader. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Cure sometimes, treat often, and comfort always. That is according to Hippocrates. As known by everyone, Hippocrates is an ancient Greek physician who is traditionally regarded as the father of medicine. He is respected as such that the guiding obligations and proper conduct of doctors, which may or may not have been written by him, was named after him. The Hippocratic Oath, a tall ethical order to any physician who wishes to practice his profession. This noble responsibility may be one of the reasons that there is a scarcity of doctors or physicians in the world. Or is it just the lack of opportunity, especially to Filipinos, to study and be licensed to heal the sick? For this reason, dear colleagues, it is my privilege to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 1520, or the Medical Scholarship Act, principally authored by our Senate President and principally sponsored by our hardworking chairman of the Committee on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Senator Joel Villanueva, my idol. Mr. President, recent data from the Professional Regulation Commission will show that there are 84,783 licensed Filipino physicians. Out of that, only 28,428 doctors are practicing in the country. For a population of more than 100 million, clearly, 28,428 doctors are not enough to attend to everyone's medical needs. In fact, according to Philippine Statistics Authority, 6 out of 10 Filipinos die without seeing a doctor. Nailantad ng COVID-19 ang masakit na katotohanan. Kulang ang ating mga doktor. Sa kasamaang palad pa ay nabawasan pa ang kakaunti ng ibang ng bilang ng ating mga doktor dulot ng kabayanihan ng mga ito na labanan ang COVID-19. Maraming salamat po sa inyong serbisyo. Sa kasalukuyan, 628 doctors ang kumpirmadong may COVID-19. Mr. President, hindi may pagkakaila na hindi lahat ay nabibigyan ng oportunidad na makapag-aral ng medisina. Ang pagiging doktor marahil ang isa sa mga profesyon na tanging mayayaman at matalino lamang ang may kakayahang makapagtapos ng kursong ito. Bukod sa daan-daang libong tuition fee, napakaraming kailangang gastusin bago makapagtapos ng medisina. Maraming libro na kailangang bilhin at basahin, mga laboratory fees at medical equipment na kailangang bayaran. May balita pa nga na kailangan pa nilang bumili ng katawan ng namatay para mapag-aralan. Kaya naman, Mr. President, sa panukalang Senate Bill number 1520 o Medical Scholarship Act ay magbibigay ng oportunidad sa mga may gustong mag-aral ng medisina. Wala na silang kailangang intindihin na bayarin. Maaari nang matupad ang pangarap ng marami sa ating mga kabataan na maging doktor at makapanggamot ng may sakit. Ang panukalang ito ay makapagbibigay din ng continuous supply ng mga doktor lalo na para sa mga lugar na hindi naaabot o walang permanenteng doktor. Kakayanin natin na magkaroon ng isang doktor kada isang bayan. Kailangan natin ng doktor. Kailangan natin ng maraming doktor. Ang pagsasabatas ng panukalang ito ay magbibigay daan para makamit natin ang ideal doctor to population ratio. Hinihikayat ko ang lahat na suportahan ang panukalang ito upang mapabilis ang pagkakaroon natin ng sapat na doktor sa bansa. Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator De La Rosa. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, next in line to sponsor the measure is our distinguished Senate President Pro Tem, Senator Ralph Recto.
Senator Ralph Recto, the President Pro Tem, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Majority Leader. My dear colleagues, a medical diploma carries a hefty price tag in this country. Tuition is so high and other fees so prohibitive that the joke is that medical schools should put a recovery room beside the school cashier or deploy crash carts all over the campus during registration time. This leads to the parents remaining in financial ICU while their child is in school. This is probably the reason why some parents retain custody of the medical diploma of their child. Because while it is indeed a katunayan ng pagtatapos for the graduate, it is more of a resibo ng gastos for them. As a friend once proudly told me, the medical diploma which hangs on a sala wall is worth as much as the manansala beside it. But because medical education goes beyond receiving that parchment or passing the board, what follows are years of training and specialization. Medicine is a profession which has more fellowships than the Lord of the Rings. The bottom line is that medical education in this country remains largely a privilege. Only the sons and daughters on the top of the economic pyramid can afford. It is against this inconvenient truth that this bill comes to light. In a nutshell, this bill allows the best and the brightest from the lower social ranks to become doctors. It is founded on the egalitarian proposition that becoming a physician should be a function of intellect, not of tax returns, nor of postal zip codes. Today, there are reportedly 130,000 licensed doctors in the country, but only about 70,000 of them are in active practice. This translates into one doctor for every 33,000 Filipinos. In rural areas, the doctor to the people ratio is very low. Often, the only doctor in this town is deployed by the Doctor to the Barrios program of the Department of Health. These are often unmarried new graduates who are willing to weave the vow of poverty and the pledge of single blissfulness with the Hippocratic Oath. But we should not be relying on missionary doctors to attend to the last, the least, and the lost. That important public service should not be dependent on the altruism of selfless individuals. This is the reason why I have filed for several congresses now 2 bills which will provide medical scholarships to the young people who have the head and the heart to serve their countrymen. The first is the One Town, One Doctor bill. This proposed law requires government to choose one medical student scholar per town. To qualify, an applicant must belong to the upper 30% of a graduating class of any pre-med course and has been accepted to medical school. Thus, it is not an unconditional entitlement. The quota is linked to merit. The scholarship is linked to the condition that when the scholar becomes a doctor, he will go back to his town to serve for 4 years. In short, this is a galing sa bayan, tungo sa bayan scheme of producing doctors. The second one is the medical scholarship bill. This bill creates another window to finance the training of doctors. You know, our spending for tertiary education will breach 100 billion this year. 112.6 billion to be exact. 38.9 billion for the free college program and 73.7 billion for the operation of SUCs. And if we are spending this much, which by the way does not include DOST scholarships, then we might as well identify priority courses, of which medicine is undoubtedly one. We have a surfeit of political science students, but a shortage in medical science enrollees. For this year, the DOH Medical Scholarship Program has a measly budget of 167 million pesos for less than 2,000 students in 8 SUCs. I do not know, Mr. President, how much the bill we are discussing today will eventually cost. But this I am sure of. The 2 bills and the one we are finalizing today will have, cost-wise, a far smaller cost footprint than the hundreds of frivolous and unessential items that annually inhabit the national budget. It is certainly lower than this year's 9.6 billion Intelligence and Confidential Fund, a fraction of the 20.1 billion Travel Fund, and a drop in the bucket of the 1.2 trillion PS budget for 2020. For those who think the cost is too big, here's a point to ponder. The most recent figures show that the Philippine Military Academy spends 4.2 million to produce one graduate. In contrast, we will be spending half that amount to produce one graduate of what would virtually become the Philippine Medical Academy. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, if there is one unassailable truth that this pandemic has revealed for all of us to come to grips with, it is that doctors are vital for humanity's continued existence. This bill, in essence, seeks to produce more frontliners that we love to lionize and valorize today. The best way to honor them is to create a scholarship on their collective behalf. Pandemic or not, this bill is the required companion measure to the Universal Health Care Law. which may give every Filipino a Philippine health card. But it will be useless if the facility he can present the card to for treatment has no doctor to attend to him. We may erect hospitals, but if there are no physicians who will staff them, then what we have built are white elephants. My dear colleagues, coronavirus taught us one lesson. We have to future-proof our country. Not only are emerging diseases wreaking havoc, but our graying population requires greater medical care. And this bill will ensure that there are enough doctors for our people, and that the next time a bat flies from a forest and unleashes a lethal pathogen that will bring civilization to a standstill, we have an army of white coats ready to confront it. I urge the immediate passage of this bill. I also congratulate the sponsor of this measure and all the authors and co-authors of this measure. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, the President Pro Tem.
Mr. President?
Peter?
Yes, Mr. President, I believe Senator Nancy Binay also would like to sponsor the measure, but she requested that her speech be inserted to the records, Mr. President.
It's so inserted.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. President, we also would like to recognize Senator Angara to manifest.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader, dear colleagues. With the permission of the good sponsor, my good friend, Senator Joel, who worked hard on this measure, and of course, the Senate President who filed this measure as the historic Senate Bill number 1. And I'm convinced he is related to Nostradamus because of his prescience in filing this measure. Congratulations, Mr. President. And with your permission, I would like to be made a co-author. In the past, I was an author and I filed this measure, but for some reason, our office did not file it in this 18th Congress. I think it's because the UHC, the Universal Healthcare, has provisions requiring the TESDA, CHED, and the PRC to encourage or to fund medical scholarships. But nonetheless, this is a very important measure, Mr. President, and maybe not known to many of our colleagues and many Filipinos is that since 2017, the Senate has led the initiative to have medical scholarships every year since 2017. That is a purely Senate initiative, Mr. President, not an initiative of the CHED, not an initiative of the DOH. But since for 2017, the Senate put in 317 million, 2018, 250 million, 2019, 167 million, and this 2020 budget, another 167 million in 8 state universities and colleges, namely UP Manila, the UP School of Health Sciences in Palo Leyte, West Visayas State University in Iloilo, University of Northern Philippines in Ilocos, Mindanao State University, Cagayan State University, Mariano Marcos University, Bicol University, Mr. President. So, nauna po ang Senado dito pa sa pagpasa ng budget, ng batas dito, and I think it is something, in a few years, we will have doctors who will have benefited from this initiative, which is purely Senate-led. It's something that the Senate can be proud of. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. President, on the next in line, we have 3 other members in line, Senator Revilla, Senator Lapid, Senator Pacquiao. May we recognize Senator Revilla, Mr. President?
Senator Revilla is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I manifest with the concurrence of Senator Villanueva that I be made sponsor and co-author of the Medical Scholarship Act. I will just submit my sponsorship speech so that it can be inserted into the records. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right.
Senator Lapid is next.
More than willing, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva.
Revilla's manifestation, Mr. President.
Senator Lapid is recognized.
Mr. President, Senator Lapid is yes. There we go.
Go ahead, Senator Lapid, you're recognized. Hindi, open siya.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Mag-co-author ako, Mr. Majority Leader. Maraming salamat.
Yes, he manifested, Mr. President, that he would like to be made a co-author and sponsor of the measure, Mr. President,
And of course,
the with the
sponsor,
permission of the sponsor.
Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to express my intention to be made the co-author of Senate Bill number 1520, an act establishing a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds, therefore, and for other purposes. Naniwala po ako na kailangan suportahan natin ang lahat ng panukala na makakatulong sa ating healthcare system. Narapat lamang na managdagan ang bilang ng ating mga doktor para sa kapakanan ng ating bayan. I am one with you in calling our fellow legislators to pass this measure. Let us do this for the sake of our country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Your
Mr.
Honor,
President.
in as much as we are on live streaming, I will jump back on Senator Tolentino and ask that Senator Pacquiao check on the attire, on the dress
Yes,
code.
I will message him, Mr. President, privately. Mr. President, we recognize Senator Cayetano, after which Senator Villar.
Who first? Senator Cayetano. All
Senator
right.
Cayetano, then Senator Villar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to put on record that in 2015, we passed the Unified Financial Assistance System for Tertiary Education, otherwise known as UNIFAS. This was a bill initially filed by the late Senator Ed Angara, which is it's a good day to remember him because this is his anniversary. If I'm not mistaken, our colleague Senator Sani was still in the House when that first version was filed. So we passed this in 2015, and the objective of this law is to reconcile, improve, strengthen, expand, and put under one body all government-funded modalities of student financial assistance programs. That would include grants, financial assistance, loans, etc. And so, as the chairman of the Committee on Education at that time, similar to Senator Sani's manifestation, I was of the view that these medical scholarships would be covered. Nevertheless, I am in full support and would also like to be made a sponsor because, as we know, many times it requires a legislative push to really bring something to the attention of the nation. No? Even though that authority is already there, this bill will give that needed push to prioritize medical scholarships. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano.
Senator Villar, Mr. President, would like to be recognized.
I just want to manifest
Senator
that I
Villar.
would want to be a co-author and sponsor of medical bill. Thank you.
All right, we place that on record also.
Mr. President, I also got a message from Senator Wing Gatchalian asking permission if he can be made a co-sponsor and co-author as well, Mr. President.
Yes, okay. Senator Lacson is
Thank you,
recognized.
Mr. President. I would also like to manifest to be co-author. This will be the second Soto law of the land if this
Yes.
once this is passed. So one from the grandfather, one from the grandson. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, kind sir. Senator
Mr. President.
Tolentino is recognized.
Yes, sir.
I also, this representation also would like to manifest intention to be made as a co-author. And if you will recall, Mr. President, during the early stages of this pandemic era, this representation was the one who called for immediate issuance of temporary licenses for new medical graduates, which was delayed by the Department of Health. So during the period of amendments, if Senator Villanueva is amenable, I would probably reiterate that call to be part of the bill in a modern version.
All right, thank you, Senator Tolentino. If there's no one else, Majority Leader, I would just
Yes.
like to place on record also the fact that indeed what Senator Sani Angara mentioned earlier is absolutely correct. That the initiative on the tertiary education, free tertiary education in the country emanated from the Senate. That is indeed a fact. As a matter of fact, if you will recall, most of you were here some years ago. There was 8.3 billion of funding in the arm that was floating, and Senator Lacson discovered it and brought it to the attention of the caucus, and it was Senator Ralph Recto who said that we should use it, and the tertiary education during that time was not yet free, and that was the seed money that was used and infused by the Senate into the Tertiary Education Act thereafter. That's why that was the only time that tertiary education became free in the country. Senator Lacson, you're
Just
recognized.
a minor correction, Mr. President. It was Senator Drilon and Senator Recto actually
I
proposed
see.
that it be used for free tertiary education.
I think Senator Dillon was Senate President during that time.
No, this was the 17th Congress,
During
Mr.
Senate,
President.
it was,
All right. So
Uh,
during the
Mr. Pre-
Duterte administration already.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you for the correction.
Mr. President,
And of course, it was supported by the entire Senate afterwards, after the suggestion of Senator Recto and Drilon. All right, Majority Leader.
thank you, Mr. President. May I also just make a quick manifestation, Mr. President? I would like to also ask the sponsor and the authors if I could be made co-sponsor and co-author of the measure. Not too many people know, Mr. President, that I do come from a family of doctors. On my father's side, it's a family of politicians, spanning all the way to Kabangkalan, Negros Occidental, migrating to Bukidnon. But on my mother's side, Mr. President, my grandfather, Dr. Manuel Fernandez, was one of the founders of Makati Medical Center. He's also the father of Philippine dermatology. As a matter of fact, the third floor of Makati Med is named after my grandfather's, the dermatology wing. And my uncle, my mother's brothers are all doctors, Mr. President. So they would be very, very happy to note that we have this type of program, because really my grandfather, coming from Libon Albay, was a scholar of UP from his pre-med to his medical years. And if it wasn't for the cheap tuition of UP, being a scholar, actually being a scholar, he had did not need to pay for his tuition. That helped him to become who he was and who he came out to be, one of the top doctors during his time. So, Mr. President, it'll be an honor for me if the authors and sponsors will allow me to be a co-sponsor and co-author, Mr. President, for the record.
All right, we place it on record.
Mr. President, that explains the nice skin of the majority leader, Mr. President. The dermatology founder was his father.
Actually, it's the exact opposite. I always get calls from my uncle to tell me to take care more of my skin. But Mr. President, with that, to allow our colleagues to study the measure further, with the support of so many of our colleagues on this measure, I don't think we will have a very difficult time in approving this, Mr. President, in the next couple of weeks.
And I'm sure our colleagues will be contributing and making this bill much better thereafter.
Yes, Mr. President, I would believe so. With that, Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1520.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is suspended.
Mr. President, there's just one more bill for sponsorship. While the sponsor is there, Senator Joel Villanueva, I move that we, with the permission of the body, I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special orders Senate Bill number 1216 under Committee Report number 85. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of 1216 is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1216 and ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Secretary will read the title of the measure. Consideration is in order.
Senate Bill 1216, an act declaring May 18 of every year as the National Higher Education Day.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, we recognize the distinguished gentleman from Bulacan, no other than Senator Joel Villanueva.
Senator Joel Villanueva is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished majority floor leader. This will be quick, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I have the honor to present to you our committee report on the National Higher Education Day Bill, or Senate Bill number 1216, under committee report number 85. Today, we are sponsoring a measure that seeks to recognize the role of higher education in national development by designating every 18th day of May every year as the National Higher Education Day. Please don't get me wrong, Mr. President, esteemed colleagues. While we cannot take for granted the fact that the second-class status of technical vocational education and training is a byproduct of Filipinos' penchant for a college diploma, we are neither against higher education nor we perceive higher education as a competitor to TVET. When considering TVET versus higher education, it's not a question of which is more important, but the key is understanding the relationship of the two economic, as always mentioned by the late Senator Ed Angara. Both the importance and the relationship between TVET and higher education are reflected in various legislations that we passed since 2016, designed to provide quality and affordable education in both TVET and higher education, the free tuition law, which is among the primary examples, as was extensively explained by no less than the Senate President himself a while ago. In 2018, we successfully passed the National Textbook Day Law to uplift the status of textbook. And today, we are pushing for the National Higher Education Bill to recognize the contributions of the universities and colleges in national development and the advancement of our society. We are witnesses to how institutions of higher learning here in the Philippines play what the World Bank describes as critical role in supporting knowledge-driven economic growth and the construction of democratic, socially cohesive societies. More so, we have seen the importance of higher education institutions in addressing regional and global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. We contend that higher educational institutions will play even greater roles in shaping the post-COVID-19 Filipino society. And so at this juncture, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we urge your support, Mr. President, for the passage of our National Higher Education Day Act Bill. This legislation designates every 18th day of May of every year a special working holiday. Let me emphasize the word working holiday to be known as the National Higher Education Day. Today, the date coincides with the founding of the Commission on Higher Education on May 18, 1994. It is to recognize the valuable role that the Commission has played for now over 25 years in the country's national development, the policy-making body for institutions of higher learning in the country. Given all the above reasons, seek the immediate passage of this bill. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at pagpalain tayong lahat ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. Majority
Yes.
Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. To allow our colleagues to study the measure further, move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1216.
Hearing no objection, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, we have next on the agenda are bills for amendments. Mr. President, is Senator Gordon ready to sponsor his amendments, or shall we do ladies first, Mr. President, and recognize Senator Villar? Mr. President, if it's with the permission of Senator Gordon.
Leave it up to you. Yeah.
Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Gordon, we can allow Senator Villar to propose her amendments as it's already been prepared, and I believe there are no controversial amendments, Mr. President. So if it's all right with Senator Gordon. You're on, Mr. President, you're Senator Gordon. Yeah.
Senator Gordon, any reaction?
His mic, Mr. President, although it's not muted, it's not working, Mr. President. If it's with the permission of Senator Gordon, unahin na lang muna namin si Senator Villar for a few minutes, and then we'll go back to your bill, the Senate Bill number 1354. So, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we take up once again, move to consider Senate Bill number, or resume consideration, Senate Bill number 1318 under Committee Report number 35. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
May we recognize Senator Cynthia Villar to sponsor the amendments, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I request that I may be allowed to finish the presentation of my proposed individual amendment. Thereafter, the other members of the Senate are free to share their own proposed amendments. I received the written amendments of Senator Kiko Pangilinan an hour before the session. May I ask him, the good senator, that I reviewed it, we can accept, there are 29 amendments. We are accepting, we are accepting 16, and we are denying 13. So maybe he can read what we have accepted, and then we can discuss what we are denying. Okay. Can I proceed now?
May I, Mr. Majority Leader,
Yes, Mr. President.
if we are going into the period of individual amendments, I also have 19 amendments. So what do you want to do? How do you want to go about this? May we know how many amendments Senator Cynthia Villar has on her own before the amendments of Senator Pangilinan?
Yes, and your amendment. Okay. I will read first my amendment, and then we can discuss your amendment. Can I proceed?
All right, all right. Oh, I see. All right. So the amendments that I was talking about already incorporated in the amendments that you would want to use. So go ahead, Senator Villar. In other words, the parliamentary status of the bill is in the period of individual amendments, Majority Leader.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. President. We were already in the period of amendments when we suspended this measure.
All right. Senator Villar, please proceed.
Okay. Number 1 is on page 4, line 32. Delete the phrase contain a period for its validity as set by the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Standards, and replace it with the phrase have a validity of 1 year. That's the first amendment.
Have a validity of 1 year. Any
Yes.
objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 6, line 30, after the word themselves, delete semicolon and replace with colon, and add the phrase provided that the representative is a small farmer.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendments adopted.
Number 3, on page 7, line 16, after the word respectively, insert a new paragraph to read as follows. An appointed elected member of the board shall only serve for a single term of 3 years without reappointment. Should a member fail to complete his or her term, the replacement or successor can only serve the unexpired portion of the term.
So proposed. Any objection? Hearing none, amendments adopted.
Number 4, on page 8, line 8, after the word shall, delete the phrase strengthen and empower and replace with the phrase be strengthened and empowered to support.
May we suggest that you manifest that you are moving for that so that we know that you're done.
Okay, I move for the adoption of the amendment.
Thank you. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Still on page 8, line 26, delete the phrase municipality, city, PGS groups, and replace it with organic certifying bodies. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 11, line 1, delete the word exists and replace with operates. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hereby adopted.
Also on page 11, delete lines 8 to 10 until the word organization. On the same line 10, delete the word acquire and replace with the word secure A. Please
Secure.
adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
An omnibus amendment starting on page 11, replace the word recognition with the word accreditation. To the following: page 11, line 11, page 11, line 16, page 12, line 12, page 12, line 14, page 12, line 17, and line 18, page 16, line 9. Please adopt my amendment.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Still on page 11, line 27, delete the phrase subject to appeal and insert the statement appealable to the BOPs, provided that the BOPs shall rule on the appeal within 30 days from its receipt. Otherwise, the appeal decision shall be considered reversed. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Still on page 11, line 27, after the word provided, insert the word further. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 12, line 12 to 13, delete the phrase 15 working and replace it with 60. With 60.
60 in words and numbers.
Yes.
Objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 14, delete lines 21 to 32.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 15, delete lines 1 to 6. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 16, lines 24 to 25, delete the phrase A recognized and insert the word unaccredited core. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On the same page 16, line 29, delete the word accreditation and insert the phrase for 1 year, provided that they shall export their products.
Any objection? All right, adopted.
On page 19, line 27, delete 25 and replace it with 24.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Okay. On the same page 19, lines 27 to 28, after section 15, insert a new section to read as follows. Section 16, section 25 of, what is this? Section 16, line 25 of Republic Act number 10068 is hereby amended and renumbered to read as follows. Section 26, Appropriations. The Department of Budget and Management shall include annually in the President's Program of Expenditure for submission to and approval by Congress 1 billion pesos for the promotion and development of the National Organic Agriculture Program, allocated as follows: 35% for shared facilities, 25% for seeds, development, planting materials, and animals distribution and feeds for aquaculture, soil amendments and biocontrol agents, 20% for extension and training, 5% for socialized credit, 5% for small-scale irrigation system, 5% for research and development, and 5% for marketing and promotion. Please adopt my amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Okay. The affected succeeding sections in the committee report as a result of the insertion of this new section are modified accordingly. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 20, line 15, delete the word PGS group. I so move. I so move.
Yes,
Please adopt my amendment.
yes. All right.
Ilagay mo yata.
And the slash. Any PGS group and the slash.
Slash.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Now there are Senator Pangilinan gave me a list of his amendments. There are 29 of them. We are accepting 16, but we are denying 13. So may I ask our Senate President what we will do with them?
Mr.
Well,
President,
we
Mr.
can take
President,
it one
yes.
at a time. Senator Pangilinan will then be recognized to propose, and let us know if you're accepting or not. So the leader, will that suffice?
Absolutely, Mr. President. Maybe the amendments that are accepted by Senator Villar, she can read all 16. And then Senator Kiko can come back to discuss the other 13, Mr. President. Yes. Mr. President, Senator Pangilinan would like to be recognized.
Yes.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, I can understand the limitations of teleconferencing and that we are unable to proceed as we normally would in terms of the spirit of amendment.
Done it page by page.
Yes, and I have not seen actually, this is the first time I'm hearing the proposed amendments of Senator Villar, and I would have wanted to be able to review a number of them. Again, under our processes, normal procedures, we would have been able to go through each of the amendments. But because of the limitations and the constraints, we allowed. We did not intervene. We did not object. But we hope that perhaps we can get a clean copy of all the amendments, including the amendments that she will be accepting, with the understanding that we be allowed to review it perhaps over the weekend, and therefore be able to better make proposed amendments or additional amendments if necessary next week or when we resume the session, Mr. President.
Yeah, we understand the point and what you want to raise. As a matter of fact, perhaps you mean that there might be some of the amendments that have been touched already, and therefore there will be no problem with that. But
yes, that's correct. It's just that Mr. President, with your permission, because we are unable to see the provisions word for word, we have it's very difficult to be able to appreciate the big picture of how the final bill will come out. And so we will need time to review the proposed amendments that have been accepted, and then if they will also, that have been introduced and have been approved, as well as the amendments that we propose that will be accepted. If we see the entire bill with the amendments as proposed over the weekend, I think we could better raise some concerns or perhaps raise additional proposed amendments after para lang mapag-aralan at ma-reconcile ng maayos.
all right, Majority Leader, I'm sure you understand the point being raised by the gentleman from Pampanga, Senator Pangilinan.
Yes, Mr. President, our only foreseeable problem is that next week we'll be opening as a committee on the whole, unless papayag po yung ating mga kasamaan that before we resume as a committee of the whole, we can tackle the amendments of Senator Villar first thing, no, first hour at 1:30 p.m. on Monday to approve it already on second reading with the permission of our colleagues. If you want, if Senator Kiko would like to have a clean copy, I believe Senator Villar would like to be recognized, Mr. President.
Senator Villar is recognized.
I would be willing to send my chief of staff to Senator Kiko or his office and furnish them my amendment, and then I will also give the list of his amendments which I accepted, and the list and the amendments which I will not accept, so that we can talk about it and maybe report on Monday what happened to our different. Okay.
Yes, yes, Madam, Mr.
Senator
Chair,
Pangilinan, yes, go
Mr.
ahead.
President, yes, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I think that would be a good approach that we allow our staff perhaps to sit down and compare, you know, our proposed amendments, what were accepted, what were not, so that we can get a good sense of how to move forward. We thank Senator Villar for suggesting that our staff sit down maybe by Zoom or also telecon so that we can thresh this out. We are committed, Mr. President, Majority Leader, to have this bill passed. We see the need for it. We see the critical role of organic agriculture in the long run, and support for it is critical. So we assure the sponsor and our colleagues that we'd like to get this done as quick as possible too, and that this is just a matter of really being able to reconcile some of our proposed amendments. Mr. President, thank you.
The decision really is left to us. We are going to convene at 1:30 Monday as a Senate, and then
Yes,
we
that's
will
correct, Mr. President.
constitute ourselves into the committee of the whole. So it is up to us if you want to spend a few minutes first to tackle this, or especially if there is a House burden, or we can take it up the Monday after that. It's up to you. It's up to the.
Yes.
We will convene at 1:30, so we play it around that time. If Senator Villar and Senator Pangilinan have agreed already on what to accept and not.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
That
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Senator Subiri, is that your daughter?
No, Mr. President, that's not my children are not with me here. I must be from another mic. But Mr. President, that's my idea as well, same as yours, Mr. President, that before we constitute ourselves as a committee of the whole, we can tackle this for a few minutes. As soon as the two parties, which is Senator Villar, the sponsor and author, together with Senator Kiko, have sort of like fine-tune the list, and we can accept these proposals immediately, Mr. President. Being the principal author of this measure in the, if I'm not mistaken, that was in 2008, the 14th Congress.
14th.
I'm very happy that our dear Senator Villar, our dear sponsor, has made several improvements to the measure. She's made it more, how do you say, more available to smaller farmers, no longer to the richer, what you call bespoke organic farming, but to everybody with their amendments. So I congratulate her for that, in making improvements to the original version, Mr. President.
All right,
So,
thank you. So what is
with that, Mr. President, we move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1318 while we are finalizing the.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, consideration is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1354 under Committee Report number 49. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
This is another measure of our Senate President, together with many of our colleagues. This is the perjury bill sponsored by Senator Gordon. May we recognize the sponsor, Mr. President, Senator Richard Gordon, and we are in the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Richard Gordon's recognized. The consideration is in order of 1354. We are in the period of individual. The gentleman from Zambales, you have the floor.
Mr. President, we have a problem with the audio of the distinguished gentleman from Zambales. He's not muted, but the mic doesn't seem to work. Maybe, Mr. President, maybe ask for a 1-minute suspension,
All right.
Mr. President, while we iron out the technical difficulty of
All right,
Senator.
please let the secretariat check into the matter. Session suspended.
Mr. President, I believe the technical difficulties we're experiencing have been corrected. May we recognize the distinguished gentleman from Zambales, Senator Richard Gordon, to sponsor the measure.
Gentleman from Zambales, you have the floor.
Mr. President, during the last session, I already sponsored the amendment. If you'd like, I'd like to reiterate it. Basically, the thrust of the amendment is to make sure that we do not give a harsher penalty to a penalty outside the court. In other words, the court has a graduated penalty system, Mr. President. And if we do it the way our colleague would like to have it, we're going to end up imposing a heavier penalty outside the court and a lighter penalty in the court. I think this is an absurd situation, with all due respect. At the same time, Mr. President, we believe that the intention of the bill to punish perjurious statements has already been attained, because we have increased the penalties by 2 degrees. It is not a mere clap in the wrist or a slap in the wrist, if you will. It is a heavy. The the perjurious statement or the perjurer will no longer be allowed to go on parole, or rather on probation, but at the same time, he can go as far as 10 years in prison, a decade in prison, Mr. President. So I think the statement, the amendment, I think is in order, Mr. President, that we proposed.
Yes, and that is from page 2, line 7 to 16, you are moving to delete.
Yes, Mr. President.
All right, Senator Lacson.
No longer object, Mr. President, but I will propose another amendment
Thereafter.
thereafter.
All right. So any objection to the amendment proposed by the sponsor? Hearing none.
Yes. Just a clarification, Mr. President. So yes, Mr. President, the amendment of the Committee of Senator Gordon is to delete on page 2, lines 7
to 16.
up to lines 16.
16.
Correct.
Sorry? Line 16.
Correct.
Yes.
To line 16.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And on line
16, yes.
and on line 17, delete the word further.
Okay, so, yeah, okay. So, all right, Mr. President, just to clarify.
All right.
Thank you.
Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Senator Dulan and Senator Lacson for their very prescient discussion on the matter. Thank you very much.
You have no more amendments?
We have no more amendments, Mr. President. We have no more amendments.
Senator Lacson?
Still in the committee amendments, Mr. President.
Individual amendments?
Individual.
Yes.
I have a proposed amendment, Mr. President, on page 2, line 6.
Page 2, line 6. All
It's
right.
a consolation amendment, Mr. President.
May I proceed with the proposed consolation amendment?
Page 2, line 6, insert the following words and phrases after the period.
Mhm.
Provided, that, any person who shall commit any of the acts mentioned in this article during the conduct of an inquiry in aid of legislation by any of the committees of the Senate or the House of Representatives, or during confirmation hearings of any of the committees of the Commission on Appointments, shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal, Mr. President.
All right. What does the sponsor say?
Mr. President, I would advise that we stick to the original proposal, Mr. President, because with all due respect, reclusion temporal is 12 to 20 years, Mr. President. That's a very severe proposal. I'd like to stick to the original proposal. Again, it is higher than what the courts have crafted, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'd like to put forward my argument. There can be no better liar than 24 senators, Mr. President.
Hello.
Only joking. Like a-
So what is the pleasure? You are not accepting the amendment, Senator Gordon?
With respect, Mr. President, I'm sorry I cannot accept the amendment because, again, it's a very, very severe penalty. They should be punished, and I think the penalty that we have suggested of 6 years to 1 day to 10 years is already very, very serious, Mr. President. Serious loss of years on the part of the perjurer, and I think it's enough of a deterrent, Mr. President.
Yes, for you're talking about a perjury in the courts. I think the suggestion of Senator Lacson is that when you
No.
lie to the Senate,
No, Your Honor.
an appointment, it is must have a harsher penalty.
That is my point, Mr. President, exactly.
No.
Outside the
The
court,
court,
this is
the court, Your Honor, has a graduated list, Your Honor, and I'd like to, if I may read them. For an example, if the perjury statement in court the penalty of reclusion temporal if the defendant in said case shall have been sentenced to death, Mr. President. There you have a very severe penalty offered by the court. In the case of the penalty of prison mayor, 6 years, 1 day to 12 years, if the defendant shall have been sentenced to reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua. The penalty of prison correctional, which is 6 months, 1 day to 6 years, if the defendant shall have been sentenced to any other afflicted penalty. And the penalty of arresto mayor 1 month, 1 day to 6 months if the defendant shall have been sentenced to a correctional penalty or a fine or shall have been acquitted. In the cases provided subdivisions 3 and 4, this article, the offender shall further suffer a fine not to exceed 200,000 pesos. Perhaps we can find an amendment in the sense that we can impose a fine. I don't know if we can do that. But again, Mr. President, the fine is already 1 million here, Mr. President. For a public officer or employee, he will be fined 1 million pesos, Your Honor.
What about if you are lying to the Senate and the CA?
Like I said, Mr. President, it would be 6 years to 1 day to 10 years, Mr. President.
Yeah, but how about the fine? Is there a fine in the proposed measure?
There's a fine, Mr. President, if the public officer or employee, if he is a public officer, he will be fined 1 million, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Senator Drilon and Senator Angara would like to be recognized.
Senator Drilon is recognized.
Mr. President, the Lacson Amendment proposes to make a special class of those who commit perjury in legislative proceedings.
Yes.
In other words, in general, those who perjure themselves outside of the court is penalized by a maximum of 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, maximum of 6 years and 1 day to 10 years. However, if the testimony, which is outside of the court, is given in a congressional hearing, we elevate that to a higher scale and imposes a heavier penalty. I don't think, Mr. President, there is a basis. I do not see the basis for that distinction. Whether committed before the NBI, whether the false statement was given before the police, or the false statement was given before the COMELEC, or any other body outside the judicial system, the penalty should be the same. With all due respect to Senator Lacson, I do not see any basis for a distinction between false testimony in Congress during congressional hearings and in other quasi-judicial bodies. And it can be attacked as on equal protection of the law provision. So we appeal to Senator Lacson, as the sponsor said, the penalty for perjury outside of the court is already increased by 2 degrees. It's no longer probationable. And if the purpose is the deterrent, I think the deterrent is achieved. But again, I always have of the theory that it's not so much the penalty, but how effective we enforce. We have sent people to jail for false testimony in the Senate, not because of the revised penal code, but because of our authority to cite in contempt. So whatever we write here, whether or not it's a deterrent, to me, what is important is enforcement. But in this particular proposal, I would reiterate that I do not see any valid distinction between false testimony given before, say, the quasi-judicial body like the COMELEC or the Commission on Audit, as this. what happened?
Senator Sani Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just an attempt to bridge the seeming gulf between our brilliant colleagues who are very well versed in lawmaking and the law, Mr. President. Perhaps I would propose that the suggestion of proposed amendment of Senator Lacson, rather than perhaps, if acceptable to him, rather than reclusion temporal, which is a big jump from the existing 6 to 10-year penalty under the bill of Senator Gordon, supported by Senator Frank Drilon, a former Secretary of Justice. Perhaps we could make it an aggravating circumstance, which is probably one penalty, just 1 degree higher. That's as a possible compromise, Mr. President. And I would propose as a possible rationale for that is because when you lie in a legislative inquiry, you're lying to the representatives of the people. So if you compare it to lying in a judicial proceeding, perhaps there is more, what is the word that they use when they describe a crime? There's more of criminal culpability, for lack of a better term. I'm sure there's a better term, no? But perhaps it is more reprehensible in a sense, Mr. President, and thus it deserves an aggravating penalty over, which is not such a big jump. I'm just trying to bridge the divide between our learned friends, Mr. President.
Yes, very good point. I think so, Senator Angara. Senator Lacson?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to support the view expressed by Senator Angara. But may I just be clarified that the objection is only on the penalty,
yes,
not on the amendment itself, which would involve a legislative inquiry and a committee hearing by the Commission on Appointments.
I think so. Senator Gordon.
Mr. President, again, with all due respect to our colleagues, the arguments are sound if it was a criminal or in court, Mr. President. And I tend to agree with our colleague, Senator Drilon. We're creating a class of penalties totally different in terms of the penalties that are prescribed by the court. It might be regarded as an equal protection law. At the same time, Mr. President, we have the powers of contempt, Mr. President. Right now, we have a prisoner that lied to us. He is still in prison right now, Mr. President. We could always go to that power of the Senate, which is, not debatable. If somebody lies to us, he will be in contempt, and then charges will be lodged against him, and then he will go into prison for as much as 10 years. I wonder, Mr. President, if we make that penalty so harsh if we make the penalty, it might deter other people from attending our hearings, Mr. President, and we'll be extremely careful in making statements and they should. But again, they would be reticent to attend our hearings. That's all I wanted to say, Mr. President.
Wait. I think the question of Senator Lacson is he's not actually pertaining to that on a higher penalty. What Senator Lacson is saying is that your objection is that you the reason you do not want to accept his amendment is that he is proposing a higher penalty for lying outside of the court or in legislative in aid of
inquiry.
Right? That is not the question. His question now is if you will not object to his proposal that the same penalties of 6 years to 10 years is meted to those who lie in legislative function in the Senate and the CA and the House of Representatives.
No. Mr. President. Mr. President. Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President. Presently, as worded by the sponsor, without the amendment proposed by Senator Lacson, false testimony in legislative proceedings is punishable by 6 years and 1 day to 10 years. That's the state of the bill. Now,
Already included, you mean?
it's already included, yes, because the Article 183 would pertain to false testimony outside of the court, anywhere. It could be before the COMELEC, it could be before the COA, it could be anywhere where
An affidavit
is necessary. An affidavit is necessary. What the proposal of Senator Lacson is to make a distinction between the penalty that is imposed on ordinary perjury in other for other institutions and the perjury committed in legislative bodies. And that is why I had very serious reservations on that. That is how we understand the proposed amendment of Senator Lacson, Mr.
Originally, but his question now is different already. In other words, if I get it right, the gentleman from Cavite, your question is, you are including the legislative inquiries. And according to Senator Dinon, it's already
included, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
Senator
With that
Lacson.
explanation, then I withdraw the proposed amendment. My only intention was to elevate the penalty to a higher degree, Mr. President. But since it seems that the sponsor and some of our colleagues are not amenable to such proposed amendment, then I might as well withdraw my amendment in that regard.
What about the proposal of Senator Angara?
In its maximum period.
No, he was proposing something else.
Aggravating.
Same. Aggravating.
Make it an aggravating.
Mr. President, I will take my position as it is, Mr. President. I respect Senator Angari. It's already covered. I think 10 years is already covered sufficiently. And I really salute Senator Lacson for his real crusade, really to make sure that we become a culture of truth sayers and not liars. But I just don't want us to run smack into a constitutional issue, or for that matter, discourage other people from testifying in our court, because we have the ultimate punishment of contempt, and we have not been skittish or shy about that. But nonetheless, I thank everybody for their comments. Thank you very much.
Although,
May I just add, Mr. President,
yes.
the power of contempt is administrative, and which has now its limitations because of the Balag case.
Yes.
It's no longer the same as before the Balag case was decided by the Supreme Court, wherein there's no limit to the period within which we can detain a person cited for contempt.
In this case, Baloyo, 3 years maximum.
Mr. President.
Yes.
This case until this session is.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Angara, Mr. President?
Senator Angara, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the withdrawal of the original proponent of the amendment, mine was just an amendment to the amendment. I likewise withdraw my proposed amendment to the amendment, Mr. President.
All right. So as Senator Lacson has withdrawn his proposed amendment, Majority Leader, the ball is in your court.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, first of all, I'd like to thank our colleagues for coming to consensus with the amendments and graciously accepting these changes. I move that we close the period of committee and individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments closed.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1354. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senate 1354, Senate Bill 1354 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President,
Congratulations to the authors and the sponsors.
Lacson.
at the proper time, I would like to explain my vote.
Yes.
Well, I am voting in favor of the measure because I'm one of the authors, but I'd like to explain my vote.
All right. We will perhaps during the third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. You to make that reservation for Senator Lacson.
Mr. President, with the permission of the sponsor.
For the record, I'm also a co-author. I have a bill that I filed, so we're all co-authors. I think we all won because I think we managed to really make it more serious. And really serious. I don't think it's 10 years is a laughing matter for them. So I thank Senator Lacson for his cordiality and for his liberality, and I respect his drive to make sure that people pay the fine. I wish we could do that also for those who kill people on board motorcycles real fast. Thank you very much.
All right.
Mr. President, with the permission of the author and sponsors, that I be made a co-author and co-sponsor as well, Mr. President. With their permission.
Recorded.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1354.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have just two other items on the agenda. Mr. President, for interpellation, I move that we Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1411 on the Solo Parents Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Rizzo Ontiveros, and to interpolate as we are in the period of interpellation, Senator Pia Cayeta.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized for the period of interpellation, and Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized for interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the sponsor. First of all, I would just like to express my support for this measure. I guess I am technically a solo parent since my since I became a senator, I have been raising my children alone. Of course, they have a father and he has his own relationship with them, but my children live with me. So to a certain extent, I fall into that bracket. And on that note, I speak from experience and also from many years of chairing the Committee on Women and Children and also working with solo parents. Now, so I'd like to congratulate the sponsor for the work that she has done. On that note, I would just like to ask for some clarifications with the intention of improving the bill, of course. So with the permission of the sponsor, may I propound some questions?
Yes, of course, Mr. President. Please do.
Thank you. So may I know what is the underlying objective of this bill? Is it to support the solo parents who are financially needy, or to just support solo parents, period? I believe Senator Gordon also asked a question along this line.
Yes, you're right, Mr. President. And I thank my fellow solo parents, fellow solo mother for that as the first question. I've also been raising my children the past decade and a half as a widow. So in its broadest sense, the bill seeks to provide additional support in raising their children, all solo parents. That's the basic principle. But I understand, as I began also to understand in the first interpellation with Senator Dick, that there may be concerns or suggestions about how to focus or prioritize the bill within the whole population of solo parents. And I will be listening with an open mind during the period of interpellation and also the period of amendments. Although returning to the original intention to support all solo parents as far as possible, certainly their welfare as a whole will be top of mind, primordial, Mr. President.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that given the input of Senator Gordon earlier this week, or yeah, I think it was
Yes,
earlier this week,
Mr. President.
the sponsor has an open mind on it, because at the end of the day, especially during this time of COVID and having just sponsored the Bayanihan to Heal As One Act, I think we are all conscious of the fact that there's limited funding in the pond, and it's really a question of how do we best help those in need. I think if we can agree that that's how we have to go about it, then it will be easier for all of us, because I don't think anyone will deny that these are people in need, and at the end of the day, it's the children we want to support. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President. And certainly I would share the same mind that The optimal scenario would be to mobilize as much resources as reasonably possible, given our current context of the COVID-19 and the pressures that brings to bear on the budgets of government, and to bring that reasonable amount of resources to as large a number of solo parents as possible, giving priority, of course, to those who most urgently need help at this point in time. Especially those who are most economically already disadvantaged, and additionally, those who are most economically vulnerable at this time of pandemic and quarantine, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you for that. And later on, I'll go a little bit into the definition of who is qualified so that we can try to filter between those who would really be the most in need versus those who may still be in need but not as perilously situated as the others. I'll leave that for a little bit later. May I know from the sponsor if she is familiar with these studies that I have read? So obviously it is clear that the objective is to support solo parents because they are going about raising a child by themselves. That is correct, right?
Yes, Mr. President, correct.
Okay. But I'd like to know if the sponsor has come across these studies that present the unintended consequences of singling out solo parents as beneficiaries. Has Your Honor seen some of those studies?
I would say, Mr. President, that as a basis for coming up with this committee report, I have relied more on the extensively studied and over a long period of time studies on the benefits, in fact, of supporting solo parents. So not so much on the unintended consequences, which perhaps will be presented as unintentionally negative, but the good effects of supporting solo parents and their children, both in terms of providing immediate relief in the present, as well as in terms of preventing further economic and social damage to these solo parents and their children, which would tend to exacerbate their already quite wide vulnerabilities, especially in terms of health and education, and which would in turn tend to perpetuate rather than cut the intergenerational cycle of poverty, Mr. President.
Yes, I understand, and I'm also very familiar with those benefits that we've seen. But I think it's only fair, especially to our colleagues who may not have studied this as extensively as we have, to also hear those other studies now, because it really caught me by surprise. I believe I came across this a few years ago, and then I came across it again as chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, no, because these are studies done in European countries where they have established very strong programs for solo parents. In particular, the ones that I have right now are a study in France and a study in Netherlands, no, where they provided support for solo. It might even just be solo mothers in particular. Let's see. Well, in France, it's single parents. So they didn't distinguish, but the one in Netherlands specifically said solo mothers, no? And the unintended benefit over the long run, because they have the benefit of time. No? We have the benefit of time to learn from them. So I think these are programs that have been in existence for more than 10 years. What happened was it appeared that people resisted getting married because there really were more benefits to staying unmarried. And I believe for a country like ours, that is something that we would really have to at least discuss, no? Because if they will stay unmarried because of all the benefits that they are getting, that would have consequences on us as a nation, no? Because we always say that, we quote the Constitution that refers to our family, no, as a social institution on its own. So I do believe that a single parent run family is still a family. No, let's not I don't want to be misquoted in that. That is a family in the same way you are a family with your children and I am a family with mine. However, what about that consequence? No, because I think it was mentioned that there are probably around 3 million solo parent families.
Yes,
And
Mr. President, according to the Philippine Statistical Authority.
yeah,
And by the way, Mr. President, those were just 3 million widowed Filipinos alone. So they account for a significant proportion. We're not talking here yet of separated or solo parents out of other circumstances.
okay. So yeah, so on that note, may I get Her Honor's thoughts on this, because it is, I mean, the bill provides for some serious benefits, which if I was a solo parent, I would be very happy about. However, we know very well that those in financial needs may choose to perpetuate their status in the in an effort to continue receiving those kind of benefits.
Well, first of all, Mr. President, not all unmarried persons or even unmarried couples who are, however, still co-sharing the parenting responsibilities of their children, they would not qualify as solo parents. So, ibig sabihin, dahil lang unmarried sila, pero they are, yung sabay-sabay nilang inaalagaan yung kanilang mga anak, they would not be considered solo parents. And then speaking of the financial aspect, actually, if you look at it, quite modest yung pinopropose na mga support sa solo parents dito. Even the various discounts only come to the range of 20%. So in no way would the discounts provided by this act offset or even equal the economic benefit that the two-person household or that the two-spouse household would provide. And of course, LGUs would be very important here in doing stringent checks on who would actually qualify to be defined as solo parents under this act. Further, Mr. President, the dominant religious culture or cultures here in the Philippines would actually prevent us from wanting to remain unmarried if there were no strong positive reason for wanting to remain in that civil status. Additionally, Mr. President, the Philippines would be a very far different context from France and Netherlands at this point in time, even though they too are, of course, adversely affected by COVID-19. When we look at the possibility of expanding benefits for solo parents, both of those countries have not only 10 years, but decades of institutionalizing social protection programs in their countries or even in their continent as a whole under the European Union. The Netherlands alone is known to be the most healthy population in the world. So for one, Dutch solo parents would not need the nutrition and other health supports that this bill contemplates for Filipino solo parents. Filipino solo parents in a country na mas maiksi pa talaga di hamak kumpara sa France, kumpara sa Netherlands, sa pag-institutionalize ng social protection programs for all citizens regardless of civil status, regardless of parenting status. Kaya di hamak din, Mr. President, mas kakailanganin ang mga lalo na health at saka education supports na kinocontemplate ng bill na ito para sa mga Filipino solo parents, Mr. President.
Actually, Mr. President, I beg to disagree with the conclusion precisely because Netherlands and France would be a more economically, the people have a higher economic level, and yet they circumvented the law by they chose to take advantage of the law and the benefits provided to them as single parents, even if Her Honor correctly pointed out na hindi sila yung nangangailangan talaga, hindi sila yung hirap na hirap, and yet they chose to use that law and they found ways to circumvent it. So for example, I'm not sure if this was Sweden, no, because this is a book I read some years ago, but it was in, I'm pretty sure it was one of the Nordic countries. A tax incentive was given precisely to support solo parents. And then they found out later on that precisely there was a decline in marriages because people wanted to stay solo so that they could continue to receive the benefits. So then what they did, they said cohabiting parents. So in other words, kahit hindi kayo ikasal, pero malaman namin na you are living together, you will not be considered a solo parent. You know what the effect was? They established 2 residences in the same house. Parang ginawang boarding house style. So to just learn from those experiences, nangyari na nga po yan dun sa mga countries that are considered more economically better off than us. So ako naman, I'm just sharing these experiences kasi I am very well aware of the solo parents who need it. No, I'm not going to stand in the way of passing this, but these are consequences that we really need to think about. And you know, in my travels around the country, despite my belief also that we are very strong religiously, my friends from the provinces also tell me that yung ibang youth walang pakialam sa pagbubuntis, yung pangalawang anak sa iba. May mga ganon, depende yan sa how you were raised eh. So I still have those reservations na ma-take advantage to. I don't really have a solution, but may I ask the sponsor to have, you know, to maybe consult with some family law experts, maybe the wording of cohabiting, kasi parang under oath dapat yan eh, nasabihin mo you are not cohabiting with your co-parent, di ba? Something like that will...
President. And as I mentioned earlier, the LGUs would be very important in verifying who are actually qualified under our different criteria, who would be qualified as solo parents to avail of these benefits. And again, as I mentioned earlier, good gentlewoman, kahit common law partners sila, nagko-cohabit sila, hindi sila kasal, but precisely because they are sharing parenting responsibilities. Kumbaga, magkasama silang dalawa, mag-alaga at magpalaki sa kanilang mga anak. They would not be qualified to avail of the benefits under this bill, and they could not present themselves as solo parents. And then again, comparing Sweden and the Philippines, in how Sweden has implemented their Solo Parents Act and how we might implement this proposed expanded Solo Parents Act, hindi rin natin pwedeng i-attribute sa iisang factor lamang a certain social behavior within a population. I believe in the Philippine context, kung saan ipatutupad itong bill if we pass it into law, mag-i-interact talaga yung sabi nga natin, yung different religious cultures, tapos yung actual economic or financial status ng mga solo parents at kanilang mga anak dito. Perhaps even the behavior of our LGUs given 3 dekada nang ipinatutupad ang local government code, and they have many times before and will be again called upon para siguruhin na yung makikinabang sa ganitong mga social protection programs are actually those who qualify according to the definition at karapat-dapat, Mr. President.
Yeah, well, like I said, I share the sponsor's objective. I just have been training myself to really look at the consequences and the future effects of the legislation that we make, to try to have a better picture of what exactly these consequences are. So for as long as we can monitor that, and I don't know, the problem is what if the consequences shows exactly that. I'd like to put a provision there that the surveys of PSA are also put into place so that we can also monitor the consequences, no? Because again,
yes,
like I said,
very good idea, Mr. President.
Ayoko lang kasi na merong nagte-take advantage at hindi natin pwedeng i-deny na wala kasi meron talaga. Again, I will also not allow those who take advantage to prevent us from providing benefits to those who need it. No? Case in point, again, the Bayanihan to Heal as One, may nagte-text sa akin na kaibigan ko na umiiyak daw yung kanyang kasambahay dahil siya hindi pa nakatanggap ng subsidy, tapos yung kapitbahay na kasambahay nakatanggap pero iniinom lang daw, naglalasing daw gabi-gabi. So ano ba daw ang sabi ng batas natin? And sadly, wala naman yata tayo nakalagay sa batas na hindi nila pwedeng iinom yung but it's a super, super sad consequence, no? Na yung ibang walang pakialam sa responsibilidad nila sa mundo, they are not using that subsidy wisely, right? But that
And
does not
probably,
prevent us.
Exactly. And in the same way, yung ilang mga tao na inabuso yung nakuha nilang subsidy ngayon para lang uminom pala. Certainly, hindi sila magiging dahilan para sa atin na either i-close down or, di ba, limitahan yung social amelioration program. And exactly in the same way, dahil magiging mapagbantay naman yung LGUs, pati yung proposed na interagency body na mag-oversee sa pagpapatupad nitong bill kapag naging batas, these would be on the lookout for probably a minority na maaring sumubok abusuhin itong batas. But more importantly, they would make sure that the greater majority na qualified talaga bilang solo parents at kakailanganin yung ganitong klaseng mga suporta will actually receive them. And we as legislators na mananatiling may oversight function sa implementasyon nitong batas, certainly it will be within our mandate to review, given the inputs from PSA and the interagency body, 5 years and 10 years, etc. down the line, para amyendahan itong batas kung kinakailangan to make the program even better, more effective to empower solo parents and their children.
Exactly, because in my mind, if we had X amount to give solo parents, I would rather give it to a smaller number of very deserving solo parents versus to spread out that small number, including to those who claim to be solo parents and they are not, or they are solo parents but they have the ability to purchase. So anyway, we agree on that point. Perhaps Her Honor can look into wording to the effect that the declaration that one is a solo parent with the sole obligation be done under oath, so that given the discussions we just had on the previous bill, we develop this culture of honesty also, because it's so important. We are depriving those who deserve it by claiming something that we do not deserve and letting them get away with it.
Well, Mr. President, the bill proposes the process by which solo parents are required to avail of the solo parent ID, mga requirements na kailangan nilang isumite. We could, at the proper time, we could look at adding that they will submit these under oath to their local government unit, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Similar concerns as Senator Gordon on the definition of those who qualify. I note that OFWs are included here, and I like Her Honor, the sponsor, and many of our other colleagues are in. I am in also constant touch. I meet with the OFWs, and I strongly believe that the sacrifices they make, none of us who have been an OFW can even begin to compare. Being separated from your family, ibang klaseng sakripisyo yon for love of family and country. To see your child grow up by through the internet na lang. At least nga may internet pa ngayon,
While you may be taking care of other families' children, di ba? So dobling sakit.
Exactly, dobling sakit. Exactly. So it's not that I intend to also exclude them, but again, to filter who of them would be required. So I posed the same question that Senator Gordon posed, that the bill says OFWs who belong to low or semi-skilled workers.
Yes,
But a very quick research by my team says that a mid-level staff in Singapore earns 2,300 Singapore dollars, which is 81,000 pesos. So I do not want their sacrifices being away from their family to be equated with with our support to them to be put in dollar terms. No, hindi naman yun eh. Alam natin yung sakripisyo nila, pero they may not need the support that we are giving solo parents who are earning very little. Iba yata ang kaso nito. We have to find other ways to negotiate for their terms and conditions of employment better and not just lump them with solo parents if they're earning 81,000. And then, for example, DH, no, a domestic health, a domestic worker in Saudi is US $400. That's 20,000 pesos. In Hong Kong, it is Hong Kong dollars 4,600 or 30,000 pesos. So ito, I think Her Honor clarified when Senator Gordon asked, hindi naman sila hiwalay. They are still married, no? So,
They're still married, but
but they
physically
are physically separated. Tapos, kumikita sila ng 20, 30, 80,000. Parang iba yata ang kategory nila, Madam Sponsor.
Well, Mr.
Iba yung
President,
paghihirap nila eh. Meron silang paghihirap. We cannot deny, we cannot compare. But it is very different from a single mother na pumapasok sa isang restaurant, kumikita ng 10,000 pesos, walang mapag-iwanan. Medyo iba po.
Well, Mr. President, not having read here the precise details of those mid-level workers in Singapore, I would almost immediately say that the domestic workers in Saudi Arabia or domestic workers in Hong Kong should qualify, hopefully, for coverage under our bill. I wouldn't eliminate them offhand from the possible purview of this bill. Pero gusto ko lang i-share ulit, Mr. President, that this provision in the bill na isama natin yung mga OFWs who are low and semi-skilled workers and have been away for at least 1 year continuous, hiling talaga ito mismo ng mga OFW groups. Dahil sabi nila, bagamat yung iba sa kanila, hindi rin lahat kasi yung iba, they are working abroad and yet for practically the same that they would have earned here. Pero sabi nung OFW groups, hindi naman kataasan yung sweldong nakukuha nila. In fact, some of them, even though they may be earning above the 20,000 a month, hindi pa rin sasapat yun sa hinihingi ngayon ng labor, for example, as a living wage. At kung hindi man sila, Mr. President, at present na umapailalim dun sa official poverty line ng ating bansa, but they could be classified even by the NEDA as near poor. And I do recall, Mr. President, even in our recent economic bills that we passed into law, meron po tayong pagtingin na ibinigay. Bukod dun sa poor, may ibinigay tayo sa near poor. And lalo na, Mr. President, dahil sa konteksto natin ngayon, precisely na COVID-19, may rumaragasang pandemic, may kinakailangan tayong quarantine na isinagawa, which also unfortunately impacted negatively sa ating mga solo parent workers and of course pati na sa ating mga OFW. So still in the same spirit, Mr. President, nung pinag-uusapan namin ng good gentlewoman kanina, I am open to amendments at the proper time. Seeking lang yung optimal, reasonable amount na pwede nating ilaan sa solo parents and to as large a number of them as optimally possible, given yung pagtingin ng lahat ng social protection programs natin para sa mahihirap and additionally para sa near poor, na yung konting pagiging above the water ng mga ulo nila could be wiped out. They could be dragged under by dati na magkasakit, ma-wipe out yung konting savings nila, lalo na ngayon sa ating health crisis na COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. President.
I share Her Honor's view that our OFWs need assistance, no? Especially those who are in the near poor. And like I said, any OFW who has to live their life away from their family is a martyr for me, no? Make no mistake, iba talaga yung sakripisyo na ginagawa nila for their families. I just have my reservations as to whether this is the proper if this is the proper bill to give them the support that they deserve, no? Kasi kung pag-uusapan natin social amelioration package, walang problema yon. Kung pag-uusapan natin is ratify lobbying for all these receiving countries of our OFWs to ratify the convention that provides for their health benefits, no?
Yes.
Interestingly enough, none of these receiving countries have signed this convention. Yun yung mga interventions na nakikita kong priority, no? Obviously, kung talagang you are raising your child alone, pasok ka. Pero kung you are not raising your child alone, you have naman kahit papano the emotional support of your OFW support, no matter how strained that is because of the distance. My point is, it's important that we categorize it carefully. Yun lang naman yung sa akin. Again, I do not want to withdraw support, but I just want to be sure that it is categorized in the same manner because baka hindi solo parent ang tawag dun sa need na kailangan nila, no? It might be a support package for all OFWs who have sacrificed their lives, no? But maybe not a solo parent. That's my only thing. Kasi I believe that it is our duty to be specific na what we are passing is given to the right groups that we are defining. So, dun lang ako may problema, Madam Sponsor.
Yes, Mr. President, I share the good gentlewoman's value for care in our legislative work. Maybe we could consider the salary as well as the classification of low-skilled or semi-skilled, particularly when looking at yung possible na pag-avail of ng mga OFW solo parents sa benefits na ito. And in any case, Mr. President, kung pagbabatayan po natin yung 3 million total solo parents na bilang ng Philippine Statistical Authority, that's just less than 3% of our population. So mas maliit na porsyento pa yung mga particularly OFW solo parents, and time-bound din naman po yung pakikinabang ng mga solo parents natin, OFW man o hindi, sa ganitong mga panukalang benepisyo until their children nag-iba na nung nag-uusap po kami ni Senator Dick na instead of at age 22, at the age na magtapos na ng kolehiyo yung anak ng solo parent. So yes, Mr. President, I will work with the good gentlewoman and with the other colleagues at the proper time on the amendments that will further make the bill an effective law for our solo parents here and abroad, Filipino solo parents, Mr. President.
And just to clarify again, when Her Honor mentioned 3 million, I assume that this is 3 million families, not 3 million. Because even if you say it represented 3 million individuals who are widows, right? So that's 3 million families. So that's not just what percentage you say 3%. That would actually already account, if that's 3 million of 24 million Filipino families, then that's 1/8.
12.5%.
That's 1/8. No? So just so that we have our figures correct. Kasi nga, may panggagalingan to walang libre. Which brings me to, well, actually it's not quite my next point. I don't want to belabor the point because I'll just ask Her Honor to consider the concerns. So when you include grandparents, again, they are not solo parents, no? So I understand the need. Grabe talaga. Like I know, and we know so many cases in the Philippines. Thank God for these grandparents who take care of their grandchildren. Kasi yung kaisa-isang anak nila nasa abroad or nagtatrabaho sa city. But again, they are not solo parents. So should we consider changing the title of the bill? You know what I mean? Kasi hindi sila solo parent per se. Yun lang naman yung sa akin. Tapos, let's say foster parents, no? Her Honor included it is my bill, so it is my law. I'm very happy about that. And I think here it was clearly defined na kung foster parent ka at solo ka. So for me, pasok na pasok yun. Kasi you happen to be parenting this child and you are solo. But the grandparents are not solo. So I'm just saying na we have to just be conscious of these things. Kasi baka naman these are just other social amelioration packages that we should be giving substitute parents, not just solo parents, no? Just something to think about para lang precise tayo kung sino ba talaga ang solo parent.
Mr. President, even in the case of grandparents, ang tinutukoy dito, hindi grandparent couples, no? But single grandparents, whether a single lola or a single lolo, and then it's defined here, who are senior citizens who have the sole parental responsibility over their minor or physically or mentally incapacitated children or grandchildren. So ang kino-contemplate po nito, ang visual image po nito ay nag-iisang lola or nag-iisang lolo, nasa kanya na yung kanyang anak o apo at solo niyang pinalalaki ito, Mr. President.
Oh, thank you for that, because my understanding of that provision I did not understand it to be that nag-iisa siya, na solo siya. Kasi pag sinabing sole parental authority, I just understood that to mean na hindi joint with the actual natural parent. So baka it just needs to be clarified. I thought it was a couple. Yeah. So,
Mr. President, I will make the language clearer. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. And then let me quickly go to the benefits, no? Because I chaired the Committee on Education, and because in this time of COVID, we have been talking to many groups, as we all have, I'm very much familiar that even pre-COVID, umaangal na yung mga private schools that many of them are closing. And that is not a COVID issue. That was pre-COVID. We have in our midst many of our colleagues who have been previous members, previous chairs of the committees on education, and who have just been active in that committee. And I know for a fact that mabigat sa kanila ang 20% discount. Now the reality is, and I will just deliver this in one go, both healthcare and education. PhilHealth does provide for benefits. So I don't quite know what other benefits, unless really the objective is kailangan over and beyond the PhilHealth coverage. We want the solo parent to have more. And in the same way with education, over and above public education, we want the solo parent to be able to have more. Yun lang naman ang sa akin, kasi then mas lumalamang naman sila dun sa couple. Kasi ganun din naman ang paghihirap ng mga couples, no? It becomes an undue advantage din naman sa kanila. Again, not to minimize the difficulty it takes to raise a child on your own, but these are now providing benefits beyond the benefits that an ordinary couple would get, given that there are public institutions that provide these services.
Well, first of all, Mr. President, excuse me, solo parents are certainly at a quantifiably higher risk of financial hardship. Kahit alam po natin, lalo na sa mga modernong panahon ngayon, kahit two-parent household, two-income stream na pamilya, may challenge pa rin, no, balancing the budget. Kaya't lalo na pag solo parent. And indeed, Mr. President, as the good gentlewoman has pointed out, PhilHealth provides coverage, although right now for inpatient hospital confinement, the full package of outpatient primary care services has yet to be fully rolled out, kasabay na po ng pag-iimplementa ng landmark na universal healthcare law. So indeed, itong bill ay nag-iisip ng mga dagdag na benepisyo sa solo parents. Halimbawa, Mr. President, good gentlewoman, 20% discount from all purchases of medicines, vaccines, and other medical supplements, supplies, accessories, and equipment for the child. In another health example, 20% discount from hospital bill of the solo parent's child if admitted for medical care and attention. So yes, that would be in addition sa posibleng PhilHealth case rate dun sa pinag-confine ng bata. And then 20% discount on consultation and laboratory diagnostic fees and purchase of medicines. So ito, ano na to contemplate na ito ng future full rollout ng outpatient primary care benefit packages under the UHC. And last but not the least, as an example at this point in time, Mr. President, 20% discount from tuition fees per child from kindergarten to college level in both, yes, in both private and public colleges and universities and schools on top of any scholarship grants, Mr. President. So ito ay talagang intensyon talaga, sadyang bilang dagdag na suporta sa solo parents na, and I know kahit na dun sa tuition fee, if I may just share briefly with the good gentlewoman, naranasan ko rin po dati na magbayad ng matrikula ng anak ko monthly. Talagang kailangan piliin ko yung pinakamahaba, pinakamagaan na payment scheme possible. At naranasan ko rin po, totoo, na umutang sa mga ninong at ninang ng mga anak ko para makapagbayad on time sa mga matrikula. And they were very kind to allow me to pay back over time. At yung iba, sinabi po nila, Oris, huwag na lang. But in any case, Mr. President, ako middle class woman ako nung maging solo parent. Lalo na po yung majority ng mga Pilipino na mahihirap. And mag-isa ay kailangang paghandaan yung posibleng mga medical emergencies or just to keep up sa monthly dapat na check-up sa mga pediatrician sana or sa araw-araw dapat sana na mga vitamins ng mga anak, and then lalo na dun sa pagpapaaral ng mga bata. So this bill seeks to provide modest but still somehow hopefully significant support to them. Doon naman po sa concern ng mga school administration. Again, Mr. President, good gentlewoman, I would be open to working with the good gentlewoman on possible amendments on how to support the schools in supporting the solo parents. And of course, regarding particular benefits, another option may be to explore with the colleagues at the proper time possible changing of the percentage of the discounts. At syempre po kapag umabot sa pag-draft ng executive ng IRRs, doon din pwedeng tignan kung paano pwedeng suportahan in particular yung mga eskwelahan na suportahan nila ang mga solo parents, Mr. President.
Thank you for that. I just wouldn't want to leave it in the implementing rules because I feel that our law should be tight enough to leave little or if not no room for confusion, no? Because that's a serious matter, and I feel that the committee should get the statements and ask the schools what are their recommendations, how they can support. Baka naman sabihin nila, oh, may mga scholarship naman kami, di ba? Baka naman nag-aabala tayo mag-isip ng solution, meron naman sila, no? Like what if they say, we allocate 10% for scholarship. So then solve na yung problema natin, di ba? But I'd like to know that the committee makes that effort because ganun din, babalik din yung problema sa atin eh. And having worked very closely with both the solo parents and the schools, I am aware of the plight both of these different sectors face. And I'm not comfortable just dumping it on the education sector because a lot of them might close down because of the nature of their not being able to compete. You know, the public schools pay their teachers better, so the teachers are going to the public schools and so on and so forth. So I'm very wary of what additional strain we put on our education system. And that's why,
Mr. President, certainly no intention to dump anything on any sector here. Actually, ang pinaka-burden ay yung mga solo parents talaga. So we are looking for reasonable ways, and that's why sabi ko nga, hindi kailangang maghintay sa IRRs lamang. Sinabi ko at the proper time in the period of amendments. I'm very willing to work on making this helping solo parents carry their solo burdens and making that a sustainable endeavor para sa lahat ng mga sektor na hihilingin nating mag-pitch in dito. Kasama na yung ating educational sector, Mr. President.
So I guess, Your Honor, that is my question. Did the committee get the statements, position papers of the education sector? What recommendations did they make?
I'll get back to you on that, Mr. President, good gentlewoman, about the recommendations that they made.
Kasi kahit ako, when we say in the period of amendment, hindi ko rin kayang hulaan kung papaano natin bibigyan ng support ang solo parents. Sino ang sasalo nun? Sino ang magke-carry ng burden? That's all I meant naman when I said dump. No? I didn't mean it in a negative way, but I just meant somebody has to carry that burden, right? So unless government will come up with the money or the private sector will come up with the money, somebody will carry that burden that we want to alleviate from the solo parents. So I just want to see it through so that it's very clear to us, no? Both from the especially since there are public schools. So if what Her Honor is saying, we don't want them to go to public schools, well then how do we help the private schools, no? Yun lang naman. And for every solo parent that we will be helping in a private school, mas marami din ang nasa public school na wala ring tulong. You know what I mean? Like, as again, I said, we always have to consider saan nanggagaling ang pondo. Yun lang naman po ang sa akin I
Yes,
support
Mr.
pero
President.
saan nanggagaling.
Opo. Fair question. And I'm sure I can get back to the good gentlewoman soonest with more information about that. And certainly, wala pong intensyon na i-favor yung public sector over the private sector or the private over the public sector. Tulad ng pangarap natin sa health system, gusto nga natin na yung public health system at yung public educational system ay maging kasing galing kung hindi pa nga mas magaling sa mga private health and education systems. Also, Mr. President, I would like to share also with the good gentlewoman that dun sa pagbuo ng Solo Parents Interagency Review Committee, kasama po lahat ng mga educational institutions natin sa gobyerno, DepEd, CHED, and TESDA. So they will be the partners of Congress pagdating sa implementation stage sa pag-implementa nitong batas in a sustainable way. More sustainable for the solo parents and still equally sustainable para sa education sector natin, both public and private, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, Your Honor. However, the implementation only comes after the passage of the law. So if we say it's 20%, they have no choice. They have to implement it. And baka nga, ang concern ko lang, magsara sila. So yun lang naman ang sa akin, no? Na even before we implement it, we should know what their position is and also force them to come up with some recommendations that are doable. That's all I want. Because
President, as I mentioned earlier, I will get back to the good gentlewoman on the recommendations made by those from the education sector, Mr. President.
Okay. And then there is also the establishment of daycares, and basically it is prioritizing solo parents, no? Again, this is a big issue that I also fully support. I have a bill on daycares, and the only reason I haven't filed it is because I am stumped with some issues that I want to try to resolve before I even file the bill. But given that there is a provision here on the daycare center, one of the issues that crossed my mind is the reality that the transportation system of the Philippines is far from ideal. So if the objective of the sponsor is for the daycare center to be in the workplace, the reality is may I ask if Her Honor intends for a mother, or for that matter a father, to be carrying their 3-month-old, their 6-month-old, their 1-year-old through the tricycle, the jeepney, the bus, and whatever it takes to arrive. Because again, I'm very, very supportive, but I was stumped on that issue because I was saying then it seems that the daycare should be on the one hand as a mother, and I was a breastfeeding mother, but I had a car and I had a mother who was very devoted to her grandchild and brought my baby to me so I could breastfeed my baby at home in between, mostly pumping, but once in a while she would bring the baby to my office. Pero that is rare. That is a privilege that I had, and I will always be grateful for. Pero the thought that dadalhin ang babies, like my office, I would always tell my staff, all the women in my staff who had babies ended up breastfeeding their babies for like 2 years and beyond, just because I was very supportive of their breastfeeding. And yet when I told them, you can bring your child, hanapan natin ng place. In fact, yung office ko, I rarely stay there because I work from the house and then I go to session. None of them did kasi sobrang hirap na magbit-bit daw ng baby. So yun lang naman yung sa akin. So maybe I will end simply by saying that maybe we think of language to say that a survey should be taken if there were takers, because, and maybe our secretariat in the Senate can tell us, when I explored the breastfeeding bill, at that time there was a daycare in the Senate. I'm told that wala na. I don't know why wala na. Wala bang takers? I don't know. So that's what I want to find out. Like baka it's really hard to bring your kid to work. So the daycare should really be near the place of residence. No? So I leave that with the sponsor. These are just practical issues that I've long grappled with and tried to find a solution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have it from my staff and through Senate GA that the Senate breastfeeding room is still there and is being used.
No, the breastfeeding room, yes, that is,
Yes,
and I know for a fact so many people use it, even people who attend our hearings, and I hope we still have the signs up after COVID, it would say that there is this breastfeeding room. But I'm talking about the daycare center, just across the parking lot.
Right, Mr. President. And I'm glad that the good gentlewoman raised that point, because indeed, even in the hearing on Monday, chaired by Senator Grace, Committee on Public Services, about safety in transit, that will also be top of mind for solo moms or dads, especially breastfeeding moms, kung isasama si baby o yung anak dun sa daycare center para maalagaan doon while she or he is at work, and lalo na kung i-breastfeed. Because right now, we're still trying to put in place the mechanisms for safety in public transport. And indeed, sa ngayon, Mr. President, the bill is worded this way, that these services, meaning the daycare centers, access to childcare, these services shall be provided within the workplace as much as possible or in a nearby accessible location. Similar, good gentlewoman, dun sa advocacy ng labor na sana may mga dorms. Bukod sa shuttles, may mga dorms malapit dun sa lugar na pinagtatrabahuan nila. So, contemplate yung daycare center din either sa workplace or malapit sa workplace. But yes, it still leaves up in the air the question of how to safely transport our kids to the daycare center. So I would be glad to continue working with the good gentlewoman on that, the language for that in this bill, Mr. President.
I'm letting Her Honor know that I don't have a solution to that, because the most that I could recommend is that a survey is done per company to determine if there is a need. Because like I said, even within the own, I don't know if I missed the answer of the sponsor, but I know the breastfeeding rooms are up and running and being used, but I'm told that the daycare center is closed. So I'd like to, if Her Honor can confirm that, that means either sinara yun against our will or wala talagang gumagamit. So we should know, kasi that's a case in point. And I leave it up to Her Honor to determine if you want to just make it recommendatory for private companies, because in as much as I want to support it, it may become dead use of very valuable space kung hindi naman nila, kung walang makikinabang. Plus, I'd like to mention the reality that there may be businesses with 200 or more employees, but scattered over different locations. Let's say, what if meron kang sikat na French fries kiosk, di ba? And you have 100 locations, tagdalawang pero all over the country.
Mahuli ako kung alin yun, Mr. President.
So more practical lang naman po yung mga pino-point out ko. Kasi, and I think one last point na lang, the majority leader can confirm this, but I believe that the DOF has a standing position on rationalizing all incentives that we give. So if Her Honor will recall, we had personal exemptions before. I might have even filed a bill adding to those personal exemptions, and yet under train, it was decided that to promote simplicity and efficiency, there would be no more exemptions. So in as much as this is one of the sectors that I would highly want to support, I am the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means, and I am cognizant of the fact that DOF already has taken that position that they will not support and they will veto this. And the majority floor leader has time and again mentioned that on the floor whenever there were measures to this effect. Again, I fully support it, but in view of the fact that that is the position of the DOF, it's something that we need to be aware of.
I note that, Mr. President, good gentlewoman, and after all, we're still going to go through a period of amendments where we might make it still beneficial for solo parents at mas katanggap-tanggap sa economic team na mag-iimplementa nito. I would of course also remind the DOF that, for example, we have about 7 to 8 million senior citizens whom we have been able to sustainably support with a senior citizens social pension. And if we're thinking now here of 3 million solo parent headed households, kulang pa sa kalahati yon ng ating mga senior citizens. So baka also in the process of amending the bill to make it more acceptable all around, baka we can still bring the DOF around to seeing that in terms of pesos and centavos, kakayanin naman nitong gastusin para sa isang mas maliit na bahagi ng ating populasyon, and which will certainly redound to less dependent solo parents and more economically empowered because healthier and better educated ng mga anak ng mga solo parents sa darating na panahon, Mr. President.
Well, I understand the position of the sponsor. However, as the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, that would then require that in the spirit of fairness, we reconsider all the other personal exemptions. So that puts me in a very precarious situation because mamimili tayo, and not just me, but all the senators who will vote for it, kung sino lang yung pagbibigyan, or ibabalik natin sa dati when we just passed the law. So I'm just stating the obvious, which is we just passed that law, and the objective was simplicity and efficiency, not that these people do not need the assistance, but that it is the best way that the economic team chose to rationalize our tax measures. And to single out one group, we remember will be to put in a more precarious situation all the other groups. So yun lang naman yung sa akin. Kasi nandyan pa rin yung mga senior citizens, nandyan din yung mga may disabilities, and so on and so forth, all the other sectors that Her Honor and I both care for. So
Yes,
that's my only appeal to the sponsor, because that's what it's going to go back to. Lahat ng pinaghirapan nyo sa train, and I wasn't even a member of the Senate when the Senate passed train, babalik tayo dyan. So sana we don't put ourselves in that situation na iisa-isa at magdi-divide the house tayo on that when the DOF already made their position on it. So
Certainly,
thank you
Mr.
so much.
President. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and certainly to the good gentlewoman. Walang intensyon itong expanded solo parents welfare bill na ilagay sa alanganin ng ano pa mang batas na dati na nating ipasa in terms of rationalizing our incentives or exemptions in our taxation system. Walang intensyon itong panukala ilagay sa alanganin kahit sino pa mang ibang disadvantaged or vulnerable sectors. Rather, I actually see this bill as a unifying bill. At dahil nga dumadami tayo na nagsasabing we can work together on possible amendments to make this bill more acceptable all around. Kasi siyempre short of at this point mag-submit lang ako sa certainty of a veto, ako I am very hopeful, Mr. President, good gentlewoman, na pag dinaan natin ito sa period of amendments, that we can come up with a bill, with a law na magiging kapaki-pakinabang pa rin sa ating mga solo parents, lalo na ngayon na COVID-19 pandemic, and which will not take away, kumbaga parang hindi ito zero-sum game. It will not take away from other sectors na sinusuportahan natin sa ngayon, and given our current taxation system and yung future efforts pa natin to improve it, but rather empower one of the vulnerable sectors in Philippine society para mas maging din siyang less dependent at mas productive. And that will redound also, I believe, to the welfare of the other vulnerable sectors. Mas i-empower in turn itong other vulnerable sectors. And then magiging mas productive din silang mga miyembro at participants sa ating ekonomiya. And also, I think, better contributors to the taxation system that we're continuously working on, Mr. President.
Thank you for the time to the sponsor, Senator Riza. I express my support for the measure. My sole intention was to raise the issues that I feel require clarification. And I do beg to disagree, though, that even though, and I disagree, but I understand the objective of Her Honor, the sponsor, that she would like to carve out the benefits for the solo parents. But what I was trying to say, I may not have expressed myself well enough, is that it does have the effect of touching on and technically amending the work that was done on train. And it does have the effect in a way of changing how other vulnerable sectors are, because then this would be the sector that benefits from tax measures by way of personal exemptions, and all the other sectors do not. And that is precisely why the DOF came up with that position. And I would like, I'd like to raise a point of inquiry, if the majority floor leader will indulge me, that has been the position of DOF, that if there are any measures, tax exemptions, they have made that statement that they will propose that be vetoed. I have to mention it because we have to talk about these issues. No, I can't skirt around it. I support benefits for the solo parents, but there are also other sectors that want these benefits, and it will take away from that pie that we have to help the people in need kung sila lang ang mabibigyan. Kung ang kasunod naman nito is bigyan na rin lahat, well, then we're going back to a social amelioration package. So I just want to put that on record kasi yun ang nangyayari sa atin, piecemeal. As your chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, it is my job to remind everybody that may affect lahat ng ginagawa natin if we tax one body and we don't tax another, if we provide tax exemptions to one and not to another. Affected po lahat because isa lang ang pinagkukunan doon. But on that note, again, thank you for your patience. I hope that my points were able to add clarity. And then may I just ask the majority leader, because I do remember that he raised that point a few times when tax exemptions were being discussed. Thank you, Senator Risa.
Thank you, good gentlewoman. Majority Leader, if I may, before you address the question of the good gentlewoman, may I also just make it of record again, because this came up in my interpellation by Senator Dick, that again, come the period of amendments, I would be open to considering amendments on some of the proposed tax exemptions, because Senator Dick, for one, pointed out that minimum wage earners are already exempt from income tax. There's at least one other tax exemption proposed here for solo parents that I would be open to considering at the proper time. And of course, after all, I'm always seeking the wisdom and the shared wisdom of the colleagues here in the Senate, how we can continue to at least consider bills that may include some proposed tax exemptions, even though we already have historic and we intend to still pass further historic tax measures. Because otherwise, if we don't at least consider future proposals, then how are we going to continue to improve the welfare of different sectors, even if on a piecemeal basis. But sometimes that's how our legislation happens. It may be in relation to more comprehensive pieces of legislation like the train and like others we're looking at down the road. But still, in this, parang jigsaw puzzle na proseso natin ng pagpapaganda sa lipunan natin, sometimes there are some good pieces of the puzzle that come along the way and can further build upon the good foundations already laid by the comprehensive laws. Thank you to the good gentlewoman, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr.
Majority
President, just to
Leader.
answer the, thank you, Mr. President. To answer the query of Senator Pia Cayetano, yes, I'd like to confirm in our initial meetings in Malacanang, and I believe our good minority floor leader was there in one of the meetings where we met with the good SOF, no, Secretary of Finance, Secretary Dominguez. He was very adamant in saying that they will no longer approve bills that would push for fiscal incentives of particular sectors. And with the threat of veto, last Congress, the 17th Congress, we already had about, I think, the most number of vetoed measures by an administration. I think we had about 6 or 7 vetoed measures, and quite painful for the sponsors and quite painful for the authors, due to the fact that most of them were requesting for fiscal incentives for a particular sector. So just a word of caution to our colleagues, although I personally support fiscal financial incentives on certain sectors. Solo parents are not excluded in my list. Of course, I'd like to support that. But my worry is all the work that we do here may go to waste if it will be, of course, asked to be vetoed by the Department of Finance. So, yes, just for the record, Mr. President, that was the position made by the executive on fiscal and financial incentives. So moving on, Mr. President, may we recognize we have 2 other gentlemen who would like to interpolate the distinguished sponsor, after which, just to inform the body, after which we will take up the simple resolution of Senator Tol Tolentino. I'm sure he's waiting patiently as well for his measure to be tackled. Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Sherwin Gatchalian for his interpolations.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Floor. First of all, I would like to commend Senator Risa for looking into the plight of our solo parents. When I was a local official, I had a lot of interaction with our solo parents, also looking at their plight and also looking at the dynamics of family and also on how to extend assistance to different sectors of our local government, of our community. With that, will the sponsor answer a few questions and also a few concerns?
Sorry, gladly, Mr. President.
Thank you. First of all, during my stint as mayor, good sponsor, I had one of my favorite pastime is solemnizing weddings every Friday. And just to give a short story, I noticed that maraming mga may edad na nagpapakasal. And I asked them kung bakit umabot ng ganitong punto. And the simple answer is they've been together for a very long time. No? In short, live-in sila for a very, very long time. But to avoid the cost of weddings, to avoid the cost of marriages, they opted to live in. And because of the need for some documentary requirements, they decided to get married through a libreng kasal program. But that really struck me because a lot of this, a lot of the reasons for living, it's really purely practical reasons, no? Avoiding cost and avoiding expenses. And although these are anecdotal, but it's consistent to a lot of my encounters with this type of couples. Which brings me, if I can share a slide, let me just, with the kind indulgence of can you see this slide? Is it
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay.
Can see it.
Okay. In this is a national PSA slide, and on your left, there's a number of living in, no, number of couples living in. If you can see that the number of individuals living in is slowly going up over the years, over the 15 years. And in fact, if you look at on the right side of the slide, the number of marriages is going down. No? In fact, in a statement of PSA, and let me just quote, in a span of 10 years, the reported marriages decreased by 20%, 20.1% from 2005 to 2015. And just get out of this, how to get out of this. Okay. Okay, yan. And just to highlight that my observation is the same with what the PSA is showing, that marriages, number of marriages is declining over the years in our country, 20% in the last 10 years. And living-ins, no, is going up in our country. And that brings me to my concern that a lot of these living-ins, their primary reasons really for financial and for pragmatic purposes, no? Mas to avoid costs, mas mura. And looking at the benefits that we are extending, I'm just worried that this will aggravate the condition of more people living in, avoiding marriages. And I'd like to also follow up the comment of Senator Cayetano that the unintended consequences of giving in additional benefits might lead to increase in the number of living-ins. And of course, we want to promote marriages for the right reason and not using the law to circumvent and just to reap the benefits from the law. So my concern, Mr. President, is really the unintended consequences as highlighted also by Senator Pia. And with the amount of discounts that we are giving, we might see a rise in living-ins in our country, which we don't want. No? Because what we want is really to formalize this type of marriages, strengthen the family, and also making sure that the basic unit of our society is strengthened.
Mr. President.
Mr. President, just one question, if I may, with the permission of my colleagues.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Ralph.
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Rector would
No, I
like
wanted to
recognize.
ask Senator Win Gatchalian, when is he getting married?
Maybe, Mr. President, that is why he's pushing for Solo Parents Act. Maybe he just wants to be a solo parent.
With the benefits, I might just opt to become a solo parent.
From experience about being not married.
Then you think.
Second question, Mr. President. Second question, final question. Senator Win, do you have a kid?
I don't have a kid. I don't have a kid yet.
You have a kid?
Are you
No,
a
I don't
solo
have a kid. I
parent?
don't have a kid. I'm not a solo parent.
You're not a solo
For the
parent.
Well,
record,
thank
I'm
you
not.
for the clarification, Mr.
Yes,
President.
but Senator Gatchalian is the interpolator.
Yes, Mr. President.
Also,
I was just noticing the baliktad.
Nabaliktad nga, nabaliktad.
Mr. President, Senator Drilon would like to be recognized. Senator Drilon.
Yes, I think, for the record, we should respect the views of Senator Gatchalian because among all of us, I think he can claim to have fathered or to have caused a lot of single solo parents. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Well, they have a good minority floor, then I should support this bill so that they can take advantage of the massive discounts being given out. But levity aside, Mr. President, my concern is just it might create unintended consequences by increasing further the number of living-ins in our society, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, good gentleman, not because I want to rescue the good gentleman from suddenly being interpellated, but yes, as I was also sharing with Senator Pia earlier, the matter of uh, getting married or living in, all the cultural and interpersonal, even spiritual factors leading to one decision or the other. We could actually look at them as separate from this bill, Mr. President, because kahit ang isang couple ay common law partners, nagli-live-in sila, hindi sila nagpapakasal or hindi pa sila nagpapakasal, if they have children, and they are raising the children in their domicile, hindi po sila magka-qualify sa purview nitong Solo Parents Bill or Act. And again, as the good gentleman from Valenzuela knows, having also been a veteran local government official, local chief executive himself, napakasusi ng papel ng LGUs sa tamang pag-identify at ng mga qualified solo parents at pag-weed out din naman ng mga hindi dapat mag-qualify bilang solo parents. And certainly, those couples who may be live-in partners but parents and raising their children, they would not qualify as solo parents under this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And indeed, no, we had a recent experience, Madam Sponsor, Mr. President. Ito lang pagbibigay ng SAP, no? And we had a recent experience and we actually caught this couple na live-in sila and they got 2 SAP forms to take advantage of that 8,000 being given out by government. No? But because their names are different and the address that they put is different also, both of them got 8,000. Nalaman lang namin because nagsumbong yung kapitbahay. And because the kapitbahay found out that they got 16,000 no, for that family. My point of the matter there, Mr. President, is the practicality and pragmatism and also the financial necessity will probably drive them to circumvent the law, you know, and take advantage of the financial rewards and also the other breaks that they will be getting. And this is evidenced by what recently we saw, no, in giving out of the SAP. And there's also one complication that I can see. You mentioned, Madam Sponsor, the role of local governments.
Yes, Mr. President.
And nakita ko dito sa bill that there's an identification card, which is actually a very good mechanism to regulate who will be entitled for these discounts. However, in practice, I remember because bawal nga yung live-in, you give a lot of power now to the local governments and the barangay captains to determine whether this person is actually cohabiting, living in, or staying with someone. And this becomes a very difficult and discretionary task for the barangay captains. It becomes also a root cause of disagreement in the community. In fact, nangyayari na yan, Madam President, Madam Sponsor. I remember one time, again, no, nalalaman lang naman to ng kapitan kung may nagsusumbong. And I remember one time, because nga, Valenzuela is giving out some benefits, those who are living in will try to aalis muna sila sa bahay if they know that the kapitans are coming in or social services people are coming in, and they come back again when my point of the matter there is they really try to circumvent. And this is where the probable loophole of giving the barangay captains a lot of discretion to determine, and becomes also a root cause for disagreement in the community.
Well, Mr. President, good gentleman, this next point of mine might not address all the possible conflicts in a community. But the bill also provides na kung makalusot man ang mga hindi totoong solo parents sa magaling na LGU, kung hindi kasing galing nung sa Valenzuela City, the bill does provide for penalties for those na nagmi-misrepresent sa sarili bilang solo parent, kahit hindi naman talaga sila solo parents. And then just also to reiterate a point I shared earlier with Senator Pia, the proposed discounts are in no way stupendous. They're quite modest at 20%. And for solo parents, kahit pa pakinabangan niya yung lahat ng mga proposed discounts dito, marriage still provides greater economic benefits that solo parent benefits will not be able to offset. Married couples ay pwedeng makinabang sa benefits as married couples sa SSS o sa GSIS, sa inheritance, etc. So, hindi mangyayari na yung pakikinabang sa Expanded Solo Parents Welfare Bill or Act ay papantay, lalo na hihigit sa economic benefits ng married couples.
There's one benefit, Mr. President, that I think will be also for me, a cause of concern. In page 11, letter G, tax amnesty and or reduction of real estate for inheritance taxes of solo parents, Mr. President. And of course, tax amnesty is quite hefty, Mr. President. And in local governments, half of the revenue comes from real estate taxes. No? And my point of the matter, if it's very difficult to determine who are the real solo parents on the ground, you know, because of possible loopholes, then possible revenue leakages by this provision, because pwede sila mag-apply ng tax amnesty, pwede sila humingi ng reduction sa real estate, might be a hefty penalty for the local government, considering that they collect half of their revenue from real estate taxes. President.
Mr. President, as I also mentioned in the interpellation of Senator Dick, I stood corrected even then that for one, the basic personal exemption from individual income tax, it already pertains to minimum wage earners. And so in the period of amendments, I would be willing to accept an amendment to delete that. I also indicated to Senator Dick last Monday, Mr. President, that, for example, the inheritance tax, wala namang sigurong nagbabayad na inheritance tax na mga mahihirap o near poor na solo parents. And then looking at what the good gentleman from Valenzuela has also indicated about the tax amnesty and then reduction of real estate, during the period of amendments, I would be very open to considering proposed amendments regarding these matters of concern, Mr. President.
Right. Mr. President, I understand that this bill doesn't distinguish if you are coming from a rich family or a high-income family and a poor family or a low-income family. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, as I also indicated to Senator Pia, in its broadest spirit, the bill would like to seek support for all solo parents, regardless of socioeconomic status. But given especially our current conjuncture na talagang kailangan mag-prioritize kung saan yung mga posibleng limitadong resources ay pupunta, especially in this context of COVID-19 pandemic and needing to come out of and then repair our economic situation. I would be open to working with the colleagues on at least prioritizing as reasonable an amount as possible of, in terms of support for the most vulnerable, the poor and the near poor solo parents.
Right. Mr. President, I remember during the discussion on train, and Senator Angara can attest to this and join in. There was this hotly debate, and Senator Risa also remembers this, on the senior citizens discount. You know? Remember that. And in the spirit of equity, DOF demonstrated that 72% of the 72% of the rich senior citizen availed of the medicine discount, but only 31% of the poorest quintile of senior citizens availed of the medicine discount. Meaning, because of course you're rich, of course you can buy more medicine in nominal terms. That's a bigger amount. And also when it comes to movies, when it comes to movies, 20% of the richest, 20% quintile of the richest senior citizen took advantage of the movie discounts, and only 40% of the poorest took advantage of that. Meaning, in terms of giving discounts to the senior citizen, we can see the inequitable phenomenon, because the rich obviously can have more of the discounts because they have purchasing capacity. And in the same spirit of equity, if we apply it here, we will see solo parents come from the high income or the high quintile, percentage quintile of our society will take advantage of the discounts. And this is also another concern, because what we want is to target it to, of course, the needy, targeted to solo parents who are indeed in necessity, who is indeed require assistance from government. And this is another concern that I have in mind after reading the bill, Mr. President.
Mr. President, dahil nabanggit nyo na rin po yung senior citizens, no? It was in the spirit of, or it is in the spirit of universality na on another bill, nagpo-push po kami para sa universal social pension para sa senior citizens. Even given itong pinoint out nyo nga ng good gentleman from Valenzuela that as of now, it's the middle class and the richer senior citizens na mas nakikinabang sa ibang items which a senior citizen status could give them discounts for. But yung drive for universality ay para mas bigyan ng access lalo na yung mga mahihirap na senior citizens, no, sa dagdag na palugit. In the same way dito sa expanded solo parents welfare bill, as I mentioned earlier, good gentleman from Valenzuela, gusto sana namin originally lahat ng solo parents makapakinabang. But again, dahil nga the situation right now is very challenging and we need to prioritize where limited resources will go, I reiterate my willingness and intention that we prioritize, especially now, we prioritize the poor and the near poor. Moving forward, we just have to find better ways, mas i-empower pa yung mas economically disadvantaged to in fact take advantage of these social protection measures. Other ways, no, ba, to increase their liquidity, to increase their available cash. Of course, Mr. President, just half jokingly, I do remember, you know, some things are more unequal than others. I do remember nung pinagdedebatihan natin yung train law, hindi tayo pumayag na magbigay ng mas malaking tax exemption dito sa isang item para sa mahihirap, pero binawasan din natin yung tax dapat na babayaran para sa plastic surgery. So, di ba? Just something unforgettable for me in our, though imperfect, but we're always trying our best na legislative process. And I would apply the same attitude, and I have faith that the Senate applies the same attitude dito sa pag-consider natin sa expanded solo parents welfare bill. Mr. President.
I remember that discussion of plastic surgery. Sabi ni Senator Recto, lagyan raw ng tax label sa ulo para alam mo na alam mo na nag-avail siya ng plastic surgery.
Mr. President, just one last recommendation to Senator Win Gatchalian. Senator Win, you can either choose to get married or be a solo parent.
Pag ganito yung benefits, solo parent na lang, Mr. President.
Ooh! Sorry, Mr. President, hindi ako naniniwala sa sagot na yun ng good gentleman from Valenzuela.
Yeah.
He will,
But,
Senator will probably do both.
ikaw idol ko.
Well,
Senator
Mr. President,
Senator Ralph.
I wish Senator Win a happy married and parental life.
But again, levity aside, Mr. President, on that universality, yes, I do agree. If inequality is not as broad in our country, but as we all know, inequality is very broad, and I think we have to strive for equity instead, so that we will target and direct limited resources to those who are in need. And definitely, there are solo parents who are in grave need of support from government.
Yes,
With that, Mr. President, at the proper time, I'll propose to the good sponsor some amendments. And right now, I've pretty much exhausted all of my questions and my points, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam
Thank you
Sponsor.
to the
Thank you,
good
Mr.
gentleman
President.
from Valenzuela. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Leader.
Mr. President, next to interpolate would be the gentleman from Aurora, Senator Sani Anga.
Sani Angara, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Just a few questions for our good friend, the lady from Akbayan and the chair of the Committee on Women, if she's still up to it.
Yes, although I'm sitting down, Mr. President, I'm still up to it from the good gentleman from Aurora.
Actually, just from my viewpoint as as your chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, I'm just wondering what is the revenue impact of the bill, because I don't want it to end up, assuming it passes, as an unfunded mandate. So I'd like to see it. I remember when I was a new congressman, there was a Committee on Oversight report in the House that said there are over 150 laws which are unfunded mandates. So I just want to inquire if the committee has an estimate of the cost to the government and perhaps to the private sector of this law if it passes.
Yes, Mr. President. I would have to get back to you on the potential loss to government, but I do have something here that may be useful on the estimated loss to businesses. Wala pa actually exact computations sa ngayon, but if we could extrapolate from the senior citizens discounts, ang senior citizens discounts nagre-resulta daw sa mga 2.8 billion pesos in losses, quote-unquote, annually, 2.8 billion. Pero considering na meron na nga po tayong mga 7.5 million senior citizens sa bansa, 3 million lamang na solo parents, so less than half. So kung potential losses sa business, then baka less than half, less than 1.4 billion pesos, Mr. President.
Thank you, good sponsor, Mr. President. Are the benefits exact as an exact match to the senior citizen benefits?
No, they are not, Mr. President. There are
more
additional
solo parents.
Yes, Mr. President, there are more proposed benefits here, especially in terms of additional health benefits for the children of solo parents, and of course, the additional educational benefits for those children, Mr. President.
Okay, I just don't really want it to end up like, there's in the local government code, there's a provision there where the children of barangay officials are supposed to study for free. But that was an unfunded mandate for a long time and an unobserved mandate for a long time until we passed the tuition. Then they really got the free tuition, but there was no more special treatment for them because everyone else got it also. Would you have an estimate for the government? I didn't get the answer. Was there, for the revenue loss, was there an estimate?
I apologize, Mr. President. I don't have an estimate as of now, but I will get back to the good gentleman from Aurora soonest.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate that. In fact, that's the gist of our questions, because we want to be able to, given I read an article that the DBM is going to propose a 2021 budget of around 2.16 or something, if I'm not mistaken, trillion, 4.16 trillion. which is about the level of the 2019 budget, I think. So I don't want to depend on those figures because it's just a news report that could easily be mistaken. But of course, we're just trying to figure out would stand in terms of revenues, Madam Sponsor. So thank you very much for graciously answering. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you very much to the good gentleman from Aurora. I'll work on that point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, yes, we have one more interpolator, but he's not in right now. So if it's with the permission, that's Senator Joel Villanueva. With the permission of Senator Risa, will suspend consideration of the measure for the meantime. I so move, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Resolution number 297 on the committee report number 53. This is a resolution directing the Senate Committee on Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement in aid of legislation in the exercise of the Senate's oversight functions. This is the Taal Volcano Resettlement Rehabilitation Program, Mr. President, that our dear colleague, Senator Tolentino, has been patiently waiting to tackle once again in plenary. Mr. President, I so move that we tackle it.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
We recognize Senator Tolentino, and I believe there were requests from our colleagues, Mr. President, just to for clarification on particular issues of the proposed resolution. Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Tolentino?
Senator Francis Tolentino is recognized to sponsor Senate Resolution 297.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the Honorable Chamber, I reiterate again consideration and adoption of Senate Resolution 97. Just a simple resolution authored by this representation and Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa. Purpose, Mr. President, is just to trigger some guidelines, some hortatory guidelines, aspirational guidelines, conceptual structure, so to speak, to enable the various government agencies such as the Department of Human Settlements, even NEDA, to formulate action plans relative to that Taal volcano eruption. Sana po natin, Mr. President, noong January 12, 2020, pumutok sa Taal volcano. Ngayon po, Mr. President, before I rose, Mr. President, my office was in touch with the Vice Mayor of Talisay, Batangas, and I was informed, Mr. President, that there are still 900 families, Mr. President, residing in evacuation centers in 5 barangays in Talisay, Batangas, Mr. President. I may name them: Barangay Tumaway, Barangay Aya, Barangay Central, Barangay Munisipyo, Barangay Trangka, Mr. President. 900 families. Inabutan pa ho ngayon ng COVID-19. Talagang hindi na po sila makaalis. My appeal to this chamber is to adopt this simple resolution. I know the concerns of Senator, the good minority leader, when he intimated to me that the provision, one of the recommendations concerning the creation of a Department of Disaster Management might be controversial. Having that as an inspiration, Mr. President, we already deleted in page 74 of this committee report the creation of a department as a lead agency, Mr. President, and I even wrote the office of Senator Drilon. That's why I'm appealing to this chamber, Mr. President. There is no funding inclusion in this resolution. This is a simple resolution that would show that the Senate is touching the hearts of our kababayans in Batangas and Cavite and Calabarzon. They are not yet forgotten that the damages brought about by Taal volcano should never be forgotten. We still have alert level 1 as of the latest PBOLC's advisory in the Taal volcano island. Basically, Mr. President, the contents of the resolution would endeavor the Department of Housing to formulate post-disaster housing programs for the affected families living in the Taal Volcano Island. Many of them rely on tourism-related activities, including fisheries in the Taal Volcano Island. But if it is now, as it has been declared, a no man's land, it behoves upon the government to provide government assistance to them. Ito lang po yung laman ng resolution, a very simple resolution recognizing the death. The family is still in evacuation center as I speak. The families, more than 133,000 families affected. 500, more than 500,000 individuals affected, 2,200 partially damaged houses. Baka makalimutan na po ito, Mr. President, as we progress on with our even evolving COVID economic stimulus responses. So I appeal to this August Chamber that we adopt this simple resolution 297 to recognize the efforts done by the government, the local government of Batangas and Cavite, as well as the continuing struggle being felt and right now by the Batangueños, especially in Talisay and Tanawan, especially with this double whammy events that they confronted after Taal Volcano. Here comes COVID-19. So my simple request, Mr. President, is that we adopt this simple resolution pursuant to Section 72 of our rules. And I humbly appeal to the minority leader that his objections having been met by this representation, as we, in coordination with Senator De La Rosa, we already deleted the entire Section A of page 74 of the recommendation, Mr. President, concerning the creation of a Department of Disaster Management. So it is a very simple resolution, a response to the Taal Volcano crisis, a compassionate piece of legislation, a resolution that would show that the Senate is really touching the hearts of our suffering countrymen in Batangas, Cavite area. And this is just, again, I reiterate, this is just, again, a hortatory, admonitory resolution that seeks to provide a framework, a basic decision-making guide, so to speak, a conceptual structure that would enable the DSUD in the days ahead to really provide for the housing needs of our countrymen affected by the Taal volcano eruption. I so move again, Mr. President, that we adopt this piece of resolution, Mr. President. Thank you.
What does the majority leader say?
Mr. President, may we recognize the distinguished minority floor leader, Senator Franklin.
Senator Frank Drilon, minority leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, I'm glad that the good sponsor has taken note of our reservation regarding the creation of a department, which we believe at this point is not really necessary, as there is enough bureaucracy and structure in our government to be able to address the concerns, valid as they are, of the victims of the eruption. Just for the record, can we confirm that indeed there are no funds being disbursed as a consequence of this resolution? Just for the record.
I confirm, Mr. President, there are no funds involved. This is just a conceptual framework that would enable various government agencies and even the LGU of Batangas to respond perhaps after this COVID-19 pandemic crisis to help the people of Batangas. And I'm sure our colleague from Batangas, Senator Recto, is with me in spirit in having this resolution passed.
So the resolution, Mr. President, suggests guidelines on the rehabilitation plan for Taal. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, and the guidelines came from the NEDA, Department of Agriculture, relative to the fisheries industry, and DSHUD, principally the housing, newly created housing department that should be in charge of the resettlement program in the near future, Mr. President.
Yes, in the course of his statements earlier, the good sponsor emphasized several times that this is a simple resolution. Do we take it that this is a resolution which can be akin to and similar to a sense of the Senate resolution, especially that it suggests guidelines for the rehabilitation of the Taal area and expresses the sense of the Senate as to how this rehabilitation can be done. Is that a correct statement, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, most especially consultations that would have to be done, especially with the evacuees, the local government officials. And as we progress near the budget season, Mr. President, I would have a feeling that this could guide aspirationally the agencies involved on how to proceed with the Taal volcano rehabilitation, Mr. President. So this is just again, I reiterate, this is just hortatory resolution, very conceptual, para naman po sabihin ng mga kababayan natin sa Batangas na hindi po sila nakalimutan. Kahit po ngayong iba namang krisis ang kanilang dinadaanan. And again, I reiterate, 900 families evacuated since January 12, 2020 at exactly 2:30 p.m. During the first explosion. Hanggang ngayon po, andun pa ho sila sa evacuation centers ng mga nabanggit kong lugar. Talagang nakakaawa na po sila. I'm not so sure, Mr. President, if the other protocols are being observed, social distancing and what have you, but it has been miserable for them, to say the least, Mr. President.
And this resolution simply highlights the need for the pertinent government agencies to provide assistance to these 900 or so families who until today are still in evacuation centers. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. President. And in the long term, to provide for permanent solutions, like for example, if it will be declared really as a no man's land, they should be relocated elsewhere, Mr. President.
Yes. Yes, Mr. President, on those premises and in this, that we have established through the answers of the good sponsors and with the deletion of that portion that will call for the creation of a department which we feel would run contrary to the effort to streamline our bureaucracy. We have no objection to the passage of this simple resolution which expresses the sense of the Senate on the guidelines that we would prefer to see in the rehabilitation of the areas affected by the Taal volcano. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I would like to thank the good minority leader for his very compassionate concurrence in this simple resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, as amended by Senator Francis Tolentino, the sponsor of the measure, I move that we adopt Senate Resolution number 297 as amended, subject to style, Mr. President.
Yes. Any objection? Hearing none, PS Resolution 297 is adopted, subject to style.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we adjourn session, it has come to our attention that the House of Representatives have already approved on second reading the granting of provisional franchise to ABS-CBN. This is House Bill number 6732. And they are poised to pass it on third reading, Mr. President, on Monday. With that, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that Senate Bill number 981 and Senate Bill number 1521 on the ABS-CBN franchise bills be referred to the Committee on Public Services. They were initially referred to the Committee on Rules, but I so moved, Mr. President, to transfer it to the Committee on Public Services, Mr. President.
You are not going to wait for the official communication that they did? Pass it?
For me,
I heard that there was a sponsorship earlier, tapos no interpellation, no amendment.
inapprove na po
I
nila,
think they
inapprove na
will.
po nila ang official status, Mr. President, is that they approved it already on second reading.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
Yes.
That's right. That's what I heard. But I'm saying that I suggest you wait for the official communication instead of listening to the media.
Mr. President, I had it confirmed with the office of the majority floor leader of the House. The reason being, Mr. President, we lack material time. We only have 3 weeks left. And to be very honest about it, if we're going to be a stickler for the rules, if we if we transfer it this week, tonight, Mr. President, technically, when they approve it on third reading on Monday, we can already schedule a hearing by Tuesday or Wednesday. So we just await for the transmission to the House, from the House to the Senate, before we can actually tackle it in the floor. But for the meantime, we've done this for tax measures and for the budget, wherein these bills coming from the House of Representatives can be heard already on committee level, with withholding the committee report until the transmission of the House version, Mr. President. That way we can have hearings Tuesday or Wednesday, Mr. President.
Is it true that what they passed is a provisional franchise that lasts only for 5 months?
Yes, Mr. President. This is the first time. This is the first time I've seen such a kind of measure. Although we have authored by 13
Should we not
senators, Mr.
be
President.
a little cautious on such matters, especially if they broke it in a day without amendments, without interpellation? I'm afraid by Monday, when Monday comes, the members of the House of Representatives who were not present today will question it.
I
That's the
believe the
reason.
vote
But
was
it's up to you. You're the
Yes,
majority leader, and you have filed the motion to move the transfer to the Public Committee on Public Services. It's up to you. I'm just saying that we are trying to be cautious here because somebody might bring it up to the courts in that case. Minority leader is recognized.
Yes. Mr. President, the way I understand the motion, it's just to refer to the Public Services Committee. But the Public Services Committee is not supposed to submit any committee report until we are in actual receipt of the version of the House, which will be the one reported on the floor, taking into account the Senate bills that are now being referred to the Committee on Public Services. So I don't, I have no problems with that, Mr. President. But I have a question I would like to raise, given the fact that Senator Poe is present. I have heard her in the last committee hearing and also in media that she will inhibit for conflict of interest from hearing the measure as chair of the Committee on Public Services. This is a decision of the chair, but may we know from the majority who will now chair the committee for purposes of hearing the House bill once it is transmitted to us. Thank you,
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Senator Grace Poe, Mr. President.
Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Mr. President, yes, I've manifested my inhibiting from the deliberations of ABS-CBN, and I've designated one of the vice chairs of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, to take over. So when we begin, or when the Senate begins with its hearing on the committee hearings, then I expect that, and I thank Senator Gatchalian for taking over. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Anyway, we were just pointing out some issues that might be raised later on. But we have no, because of parliamentary courtesy, we cannot question whatever the procedures they want to do, as much as they cannot question the procedures that we would want to follow if we want to be strict on the rules. Anyway,
That's correct, Mr. President.
so the motion is to transfer. Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Although, Mr. President, it's not completely true that Senator Gatchalian is neutral because his heart belongs to someone from ABS-CBN.
Then you should inhibit also.
No, hindi naman siguro kailangan, Mr. President. Hindi naman sila kasal. Pero,
Mr. President.
Yes.
Senator Drilon, Mr. President, would like to be recognized.
Yes, why is the bed behind the Senator Gatchalian?
Mr. President, I was debating whether to go off air or not because of that bed. But does not allow a blurred background, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President. Thank you for that motion, Mr. President. Mr. President, just a reiteration to the body. We've submitted to our colleagues already the new list of the listings for next week's Committee of the Whole after discussion yesterday with Secretary Myra. The first day, of course, will be the general overview, and we will have the Interagency Task Force, the IATF, the Department of Finance, the DBM, NEDA, Department of Interior and Local Government, Department of Social Welfare, the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, and the World Health Organization will be there on Monday. On day 2, the title of our discussions will be on the health situation and economic impact. So we will have members of the DOH, the attached agencies such as the RITM, the Epidemiology Bureau, PhilHealth, Food and Drug Administration, and Bureau of Quarantine, and UPPGH. We'll also have the Department of Tourism, Transportation, Labor and Employment, Foreign Affairs, Finance, and under the Department of Finance, we have the BIR, Bureau of Customs, Bureau of Treasury, and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. And on May 20, which is the third day, we will have the state of the food, energy, and education sectors. So we will have the Department of Agriculture, Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Energy, Department of Education, Commission on Higher Education, and TESDA with us on those days. Unless there are other suggestions, Mr. President, maybe they can just let our office know. Senator Angara, Mr. President, would like to be recognized, Mr. President.
Senator Lugar is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. If Senator, just on the previous matter, if Senator Gatchalian does not pass the franchise as fast as the House, he might be a solo parent forever, Mr. President.
Then so much so we have to pass the bill of Senator Risa so I can take advantage of the exemptions.
Okay, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, no other matters are in the agenda. I'd like to congratulate everyone for a very, very fruitful day today. We heard a lot of measures and approved some of them. Mr. President, with that, I move that we adjourn session until 1:30 in the afternoon. I repeat, 1:30 in the afternoon of Monday, May 18, 2020. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the session is adjourned until 1:30 in the afternoon of May 18, Monday, 2020.
Okay, happy
Thank
weekend.
you. Happy weekend.